Now recording. We can just get up and break.
I need to mute on there.
With each of that because
Okay.
all right. All right, Chris. So we'll probably be here shortly. Okay, it is 6:05, calling to order the November 21st, 2023 meeting of the Manchester-Essex Regional School District School Committee. We will begin with public comment. Anyone joining us online or online, if you could please put your name and address in the chat to let us know that you are interested in making public comment. And while we wait for that, we will open it up to anyone in person. Would anyone in person like to make public comment tonight? Please say your name and address.
I would like to read the MCAS scores for both elementary schools. These numbers are the percentages of kids scoring a meets or exceeds on the exams. For science, technology, engineering, Manchester Memorial had 68%. Essex Elementary had 29%. For math, Manchester had 67%, Essex had 38%. And for English language arts, Manchester had 61% and Essex had 50%. I'd also like to discuss the difference in scores of the state's accountability system. The system analyzes a set of measures to provide information about a student's performance compared to other schools. Manchester Memorial scored 94%. Essex Elementary scored 55%. And this is not just a single year's metric, but a trend. The declining scores at Essex Elementary go back at least 4 years. The state also has a criterion referenced target percentage. This percentage measures change in performance in the past year. The middle and high school scored in the 80th percentiles, and Manchester Memorial scored 71%. These all translate to substantial progress towards targets. Essex Elementary scored 21%, which translates to limited or no progress toward targets. These numbers were presented at the November 7th school committee meeting. I find it curious that the difference in these numbers was not discussed. So my question is, where is the concern? I've heard no discussion regarding the differences in these numbers. If any of the other schools in the district had these scores instead of Essex Elementary, there would be an outrage. And I can't help but think, does the lack of education to the Essex Elementary kids then result in an increased need for special ed in middle school and maybe even into high school? And does it result in parents sending their kids to private school, affecting our enrollment? So I'd really like to know why you expect Essex residents to increase their taxes or support a budget when it's their own children that are not being supported in the same way as our friends in Manchester. Lastly, I'd like to thank the teachers of Essex Elementary School. Please know that you are appreciated. My comments are meant as a basis of comparison and in no way a criticism of your abilities. Both my kids continue to thrive in middle school, albeit with lots of extra help, but they are a testament to your commitment to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonella. So this is a real test of my ability to stick with our own rules, which is that for public comment, this isn't a back and forth, though at some point in the meeting, I'm certain that we will respond to it, likely Pam in her superintendent's report, if I could be bold. Would anyone else in the room like to make public comment? No? Now's the time.
Yeah, no,
I'd like to make public. Anita, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, that's right. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Anita McKinnon, Lowland Farm. I speak to you today as a parent of an Essex student. I'm not speaking to you as a member of the Essex Finance Committee. Given the narrative in the public domain, I'm imploring the school committee to understand your place in all of the discussions. The towns of Manchester and Essex cannot be pitted against each other. And I believe the school committee does have a responsibility to ensure that we can work together. Here are some facts. The school committee knew of the outside independent third-party review. While the scope of work had not been defined, it is disingenuous to allow the public narrative that the school committee just had no idea. Fact, MERC is not a private school. The statement that we have to compete with private schools just has to stop. Fact, it is not the town of Essex's problem that enrollment by the town of Essex has increased. The town of Essex has had a decrease in enrollment of 12.4% from 2013 to 2023. The town of Manchester has lost 222 students. This is a drop of almost 25%. Another fact,
For the fiscal year 21 budget, Manchester asked for a reduction of 150,000 in the budget. To be honest, I can't figure out if that was done, but I don't recall the amount of noise made that Manchester had asked for a reduction in the budget. In fact, the split for apportionment in Manchester has never been above 4% in the last 10 years. And lastly, I want to read the budget goals that has been written on multiple, whatever we call these presentations, that it is to develop and deliver a fiscally responsible budget that maintains educational quality, supports district goals, aligned with a multi-year budget commitment to work within the confines of Proposition 2.5. This is in almost every single presentation and then just stops in fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23. We need to work together. Last spring, the students in Essex were put in a very tough spot. Teachers, students, parents made it clear to the students that it was somehow Essex's fault. We need to all work together. We all have the shared goal that the students are all as one community. And I think we have to be able to look forward to finding a solution.
Thank you, Nina. Is there anyone in the chat that has put their name and address in the chat? Maria, I can't see the chat. Oh, you can't either. Sorry.
No, I don't see anything in the chat.
All right, there's nothing in the chat.
This
but
is-
I see.
This is Jay Tetzloff. I've got my hand up. I can't figure out how to send a chat, but I'm in the meeting.
Okay, could you just start with your name and address then? And
Yeah, this is Jay Tetzloff, 98 Western in Essex.
thank you. Go
I
ahead and
just
make
wanted-
your,
I just wanted to build on the previous comment about working together. I haven't been actively involved in these conversations, but the little bits that I've heard both at town meeting and at other coordination of business meetings suggest that the school committee doesn't seem to feel any particular accountability to either town's board of selectmen or finance committee, because I think they know that they can ram through anything they want by resorting to a super town meeting if necessary. And that's just an uneasy feeling. Again, that's not a partnership, and it's not what I expect. Again, I don't have kids in the schools, but I want to retire in Essex, and this budget thing has to get resolved. And in order to have a chance of that, we have to work together better. Thank you.
thank you, Jay. And I'm sorry, I still don't see anyone in the chat, but did I see another hand?
Sarah Pierce.
Is that correct?
Sarah
All right,
Pierce.
Sarah Pierce, would you unmute and give your name and address for the record?
Yes, hi, thank you. Sarah Pierce, 9 Friend Street in Manchester. And I just wondered what the reasoning behind, if you could give a reason at some point for the school committee's stance or formal stance on not having a third-party audit done at the town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else in the chat? Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment and move on to chairperson's report, which I may revise slightly based on the public comments we've had. So for a chairperson's report tonight, since we last met, I stood in representation at our Essex special town meeting while Anna, as our vice chair, was representing our committee at the Manchester special town meeting held at the same time. Just in response to a couple things here, I do want to clarify that we will talk later in the agenda about outcomes from the special town meetings. But just to be very clear, I will take the opportunity right now to say, the school committee, we spent quite a lot of time last time. We stayed late to get the wording just right. We made very clear that we did not have a position for or against that article. There's also been some I don't believe malicious, but just misrepresentation of some of the information. We did know, we absolutely as a committee knew that these were going to be on town meeting warrants as of, I want to say our October 3rd meeting, because we discussed it here. Either October 3rd or October 17th, but we did know in advance that that was going to be the case. We found out about it. I found out it initially by email. It was the 17th that we discussed it. I found out about it by email the day before from somebody else. So it's not that we didn't know this was going to be the case, but our official stance on this, I just want to make sure that I'm clear, because this actually came up in something else that I did do, is that we've had some insufficient time to determine whether we, meaning the committee and the town partners, can collaboratively develop a scope of work. Therefore, the committee does not take a position, as in on the articles themselves, at this time. So the in-depth discussion that we had last time we were here was not that we were taking a stand for or against this. It was that the proposal that was brought forth to us on the 7th of November did not give us sufficient information or time to determine whether or not we would be able to come up with a collaborative scope of work. So rather than get into whether we were for or against such a thing, that is the position we took. And I know it has been represented in social media and in conversation that we were against. It also was represented that way in the minutes from the Essex town meeting, the actual minutes from the Essex town meeting. And I did send an email today asking for that correction because we did not speak against the article at all. So at this point, we will discuss the outcomes from that, but I just wanted to really clarify that on its face right there. In addition to our special town meetings, we did have a student advisory council meeting on the 15th. So 2 days after that special town meeting. Diego wasn't there, so I'll just give you a quick overview. We talked a little bit about the trajectory through the high school experience, how you plan out your classes and when you do that and how it works, which led into a nice conversation about availability of classes and continued discussion on the student perspective of things like class size limits that we're considering here as a policy. So that was very interesting. And next time we will continue that conversation and also get into grading a little bit. It started to come up and have a further conversation about that.
And that was an ask from the students.
Yes,
Great.
yes, that was an ask from the students, yes. And then just pondering where we are, we have a lot to cover tonight, but it's a different kind of agenda. We don't have big presentations coming. We have a lot of discussion tonight. We have some really specific things. The agenda has been laid out very intentionally. The way it's been laid out is intentional. And the framing of each conversation will be intentional as well. We do have a hard stop at 9. We really need to honor that because we have been trying very hard to do so. And we also have committee members who really do need us to honor that. So as we move forward, I would just ask that we keep in mind that we're doing this work as a united body. Let's come to it because we're in it now. And tonight we have a lot of opportunity for discussion moving forward. So with that being the case, I will invite Chris, would you read the protocols for tonight? So it's these two together because they're short.
Sure, yeah. Agree that our positions will not be used for personal or partisan gain and conduct business through meetings with a set agenda that is tied to district goals. Emerging items shall be addressed in subsequent meetings through planned agenda items.
Thank you very much. That concludes my chairperson's report. So student report.
Yeah, like this would have been said, I'm a little bit out of the loop, so I was not at the meeting last week, I was kind of at a commission. But I guess kind of like listening to the topics that they discuss, class sizes and kind of, you know, should there be a limit, should there not be? I guess I'd like to maybe just provide like a little bit of food for thought, kind of going into like, obviously gonna talk about the budget tonight. I'm sure class sizes will come up at some point today, if not, definitely in the future. I think that like it's definitely a very nuanced issue because, you know, certain classes are going to be small for different reasons, and you know, one class might be small one year and might be big the next year. And I think kind of like tying that into, you know, the student's trajectory going through the high school from, you know, freshman year to their senior year, as well as I guess, you know, the teachers, if the students are in an environment where they don't know if a class is going to be running the next year, or they don't know if a class is going to be running in 2 years from now because of uncertainty with the budget situation, that definitely makes it a lot harder to kind of plan your trajectory throughout high school and your goals with AP classes or moving through any given curriculum, like whether that be foreign language or science classes or art classes as well, for that matter. And I think I'm not a teacher, but I would assume that if you were a teacher and you didn't know which classes you were going to be teaching next year, or there was a lot of uncertainty there, like it would be difficult to have to say, okay, I'm going to teach this class this year, then I might have to do a different one next year, and I might continue to teach this one, but maybe not. Like I could imagine that that would be difficult, and that uncertainty is definitely challenging for the students, just because, like I know what it's like, and I know a lot of people who really struggled with that this year, kind of like being really unsure what their schedule is going to look like, which as a junior going into your senior year can be challenging, to say the least.
Thank you. Any committee members have questions for Diego? Go ahead, Anna.
I'll be quick. So one of the discussions that we've been talking about is not just the class size, but the level of services that we provide to the students. And a lot of our emphasis is on, making sure that we bring people to the level that they should be. A student such as yourself that excels in classes, do you feel sometimes that you don't have as many options, or especially now we're looking at, potentially, reducing the class size or the different classes? Do you feel like you are limited with opportunities that you cannot, look to your full potential?
I think that's an interesting question, because I think right now where I am in high school, kind of looking back at what I've done, I'm happy with the opportunities that I had. I took all the classes that I wanted to take, and this year I was able to take, all the classes that I want to take. I think that being said, maybe if there was a time where I felt maybe a little bit limited in what I could do, it would probably be more my freshman and my sophomore year, kind of earlier in high school, when there is less, I don't know what the right word is, when there are less like options of levels, where it's like, okay, there's going to be a lot of kids in an honors level class, but the level of ability and skill in that class is going to be like very wide, meaning like there might be some people that need a lot of help. There might be other people that are excelling and like really probably shouldn't even be in that class in the first place. So I would say, yeah, I think at some points it was earlier on in high school, it was kind of like there would be situations where like me and students similar to myself maybe felt like they weren't really getting like the attention that they needed in certain classes, just because of like the wide range of students that were in the classroom.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Any other questions for Diego? All right. Well, thank you for your student report. You're welcome to stay or go as long as you wish. There's a teacher versus students game, so we appreciate you, however. Moving on to the consent agenda. Excuse me. I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda, which includes vouchers for warrants 1026, warrants for vouchers 1026, 1027, and 1028, the minutes from the November 7th, 2023 meeting, and a donation from the Manchester-Essex Athletics Booster Club in the amount of $6,200. Is there a motion?
Sure, motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Point of order. We wrapping the gift into the one vote with the warrant?
Yes, that's the way that it was described, is that comes under the consent agenda typically. So, but we can discuss it right now if there's questions or concerns about
No,
it.
it's just felt like an odd move, that's all.
It's just where it typically,
Pull it out.
We don't need to, I'm just clarifying.
that's where it generally, that's the standard operating procedure that we've been using. We can change that if
I
we
don't have
wish.
a ton of them, but
Yeah, when it happens.
it
that's
could
how.
easily be put someplace else on the agenda if you feel like it's more discussion needs to be had about it.
Do we feel more, does anyone have discussion?
I had one question about it. Can I?
Tammy, or is it Dan?
Well, first, can we actually state what it is so that
Yeah.
people who are listening know?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It is a donation from the Manchester-Essex Athletics Boosters Club in the amount of $6,200 for the purpose of a high jump pit for the indoor track and field program. So any gifts and donations over $5,000 are officially accepted by the school committee.
I just had a point of clarification. Was the gift actually specifically earmarked for the pit? Correct. That's all I wanted. I couldn't tell it. Couldn't tell which part we were.
Yep. Is this from the carnival?
It's actually an anonymous donor that felt that our indoor track team had a need for an indoor pit and decided that they wanted to provide a donation to the boosters.
So process was followed. Okay, hearing no further discussion, all in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous.
If we should get another great opportunity in the future to have a donation, you want us continue business, new business, or in the consent agenda?
I'm fine with it in the consent agenda as long as we have a
Yeah, we
chance to
can always
discuss
separate
it.
it if we need
And
to.
if we need to discuss it, we can, but.
Just advise if you'd like a different.
Okay. All
Are we expecting a lot of donations?
right.
Every
Let's
once in a while,
manifest
get a-
donations, okay?
Well, I know Spalding is getting back up and running, so there could be
Yeah.
some things down.
It's great.
Thank you, Anonymous.
Indeed.
Thank you all.
Thank
From
you.
here, we'll issue a letter on behalf of the school committee that would go to the Hooper Fund. They could share it if they know who to share it with.
All right. Thank you very much.
Tammy, for managing this whole piece.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Huge.
Thanks, Amy.
They're all thrilled.
Excellent.
They will be jumping for joy.
Have a good game.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Bye, thanks.
All right, on to subcommittee reports. There is no report from facilities. Collaboration has a two or three-part report. So I will report out on the collaboration, and then I know Anna had brought forth a question in email that now would be the time to discuss. So the collaborative group was scheduled to meet on November 9th. And everybody here should have received an email with the very short summary from that. The meeting was canceled. The group did log in for the meeting, but it was immediately proposed that it not continue because an email had gone to the entire collaboration group participants, all the participants, shortly before the meeting with concerns about open meeting law. And at this time, I will add that we also, I think it was the whole committee, received a separate email from a community member with concerns about collaboration group and how to access information about it and how this is happening and why. So at that time, it was decided not to move forward with the meeting. And there's not really a status right now in terms of, there doesn't appear to be any ownership at this point. We just sort of stopped any ownership about who's looking into whether or not there is an open meeting violation. I don't think it's fair to say that by stopping the meeting that there was any agreement that it is an open meeting violation, but it is a concern that needs to be addressed. So with that, the collaboration meetings are currently not happening until we work out whether that's the case and if we need to set it up in a different way. But at the same time, I would like to make a motion at this time, which I can give reasons for in discussion if it is seconded. So I move that we suspend our participation in closed collaboration meetings until such time as the committee decides by majority vote to recommence participation in closed collaboration meetings. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. So I will share my reason for making the motion, and then I'm open to reasons. So first of all, there is continued ongoing concern about open meeting law. It's not, we've discussed here about how we feel about having the meetings be open, and we decided to engage. And we're still at a point where it's not really serving its purpose in that way for our committee. So with that, it's already on hold at the moment, but even if it were to reconvene, I still think we should hold if they are closed meetings for two reasons. One is that the purpose of the collaboration meeting, as we all came to discuss it, not this group, but the collaboration meeting came to discuss it, and we discussed here early in the fall, what it is to make sure that everybody understands each other's limitations, the pressure points and what the constraints are for upcoming things, and that there be a no surprises approach. And that the group be a place where problem solving can take place and the vetting of ideas that are then presented to boards and committees. We attempted to create more transparency with this process by adding in the summaries and by including the all boards meetings, which we have had one of. The second one, I think, is tentatively January was the timeframe we were looking at for that. We now know the limitations. We know that we have kind of a line in the sand between our two town partners at this point in terms of knowing the budget constraints. And the problem solving aspect of this, I don't know, has been, it feels like it's at a standstill. And I think that especially the conversations that we have been having, even since trying to increase the transparency, I have not been privy to any conversations in collaboration meeting that couldn't have taken place in open meeting. So we're not currently discussing things that are sensitive to the towns and such. And the work of problem solving it's not just what we talk about, it's how. And I think that it's really valuable for our committee to have a full understanding of how these conversations are taking place. So those are the reasons that I'm putting forth for suspending this. Again, it doesn't have to be forever, but at least for now is my point there. So thoughts, further discussion on this motion? Yeah, please.
What's the purpose of that? Is it just to put a stand to show that we stand, that we do not want closed meetings, we only want public meetings, but we do want collaboration meetings? What's the purpose of this?
So the purpose is to say that we will not participate in closed collaboration meetings. Now, beyond that, there are options before us. So we could say if the collaboration meetings were public meetings, that we'd be glad to participate. Frankly, I would support that. I think there's value in that group of people having conversation. But I think the value of it being closed is doing more harm than good at this point.
So when the collaboration first started, I don't know how many years ago, was it first started for both towns to collaborate? Or was it started for school committee to figure things out?
Collaboration group started 14 years ago. It existed as a chairs get together prior to that, is my understanding, where chairs would get together, have coffee, and share kind of what was going on in each of the meetings. Tony Geet was the chair at the time, and when I arrived, we moved to formalize it, knowing we would have upcoming overrides in the next few years, because at that time we were experiencing a spike in enrollment. So we started just a practice of Friday mornings, maybe once a month during budget season, getting together to share status reports. It was the town administrators, myself, and the chairs of the boards. And that's all it was. It was never a formally posted meeting. It was never a meeting with minutes or even with an agenda. The rough agenda we use now is really just, has been put in place to kind of just organize our time a little bit. And that operated like that right up until the beginning of last year, where, we're seeing that memorial schools, things like, memorial schools coming up, we're thinking about the SOI, where your boards might stand on that. So it's just information sharing. We would get reports on financial obligations, things that were coming up in the town. So information sharing primarily between the chairs and the town administrators, and myself and Holly would come details.
I personally think it's great to openly talk about everything, and everybody's on the same page. However, that's the ideal situation. But looking at the budget calendar that we are putting out today, that the only time that the joint boards are together is December 13th, when we're talking about public hearing on the budget. And the next one is the second public hearing on the budget, January 23rd, nothing in between. So we desperately need to work together with those towns.
So are there no collaboration group meetings that were scheduled between now and January?
It's on hold right now.
Well,
But there were, and if they were open, they still would be?
Let me get to it.
Yeah,
So
nothing
I
is scheduled.
personally feel that we shouldn't talk about it openly. But like if we were, I don't know what's the next step with the collaboration meeting right now. Whether the both towns, they want to work together, whether the same time they get together to talk, I feel like it depends on what's next for the collaboration. If they proceed with not closed, but there's discussion going, I think it will be not helpful for school committee not to participate if there is still a meeting without school committee, right? So I personally feel that why take a stand? I advocate for as public and transparent as possible, but but we need more time to work with both towns and all the boards. And there are only two scheduled right now, nothing in between. So if the corporation will provide us with that kind of opportunity, I wouldn't say no to that personally.
So in response, which I appreciate that, and you have been advocate for open meetings. Just for everyone else to be clear, the collaboration group, that we don't have like an annual schedule.
Right.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It's basically when someone calls a meeting, we see when it works for everyone. So there could be a collaboration meeting perhaps in advance of as an example, it wouldn't be unusual after our December 5th meeting, but potentially before the public hearing for the collaborative group to meet, so that it's no surprises when we get there, that sort of thing. That would not be unusual. I will say that if it's not so much about taking a stand, I'm more in attitude right now of what's best serving our committee. And right now, what will best serve our committee and the work that we need to do is for everyone to have full access to what's being said and how. And that's my strong feeling for the ask, but I understand your point. Erica, and then Kate.
Well, as of now, looking at the notes from the last meeting, the meeting and the group will not reconvene until a determination about the group being subject to open meeting law is made.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is in hiatus. And so regardless of your sentiment, Teresa, isn't the most efficient way to go, since I think we all agree that some type of collaboration is necessary, and we can't have closed door collaboration because there's this indeterminate amount of time that's needed to consider whether or not it's a violation.
Right.
So why don't we just propose that we have an open collaboration group meeting to avoid a long drawn out and protracted legal nightmare evaluation of open meeting law?
Well, and that is the other benefit here, is that it solves that problem.
Right, and so I'm just saying, I think we can even like, in some sense.
It's not the same. Yeah.
It achieves the same result, but my point is, I think just in terms of effectively moving the budget forward, we shouldn't continue to wait. So we should just do it and propose it in public.
Got it. And I should say too, I think it is really important, and I think our committee would probably support this, I would hope. I do think it's important that that Pam and perhaps the town administrators, feel free to meet privately, the three top paid employees on, that work with the boards, be able to meet on their own in case there is something pressing that really shouldn't be discussed in open meeting, that you guys can be on top of that together. And that does happen anyway. Exactly. So, Kate, you had a comment?
Yeah, I have three concerns. One, the primary one being open meeting law. I do believe that as it was described to us, it was functioning in an advisory capacity. So I believe it was functioning as a subcommittee of each of the larger groups. Beyond the legality of it, I believe that legal standard is there for all of us to have access to important information to make informed decisions. I believe that when we are presented with recommendations or proposals from the collaboration group, I am unable to fully discuss and consider them because I do not have access to the discussion that went into the proposal. I do not have all of the information. It is a very finely filtered summary that is coming out of these groups. And I think that it gets in the way of me doing my work as a school committee member. My third point is that I agree with Erica in how we approach this, because I think that what we are hearing from some members of the public is that we are viewed as non-collaborative. I think it is very important to establish that we are all willing to collaborate and that we are here to collaborate. And that we want everyone in all of our communities to have access to those conversations so that they can see how that collaboration is happening. It is not that we don't want to collaborate, it is that we want everyone to be able to see the collaboration. And so
That's a good point.
can we amend your motion to say that the school committee will participate in open collaboration group meetings?
Or will only participate
Right,
rather than suspend. So just reframing it
Yes.
into a will.
yes.
Do that. Just go
I
ahead.
was
Pam.
gonna share, in listening to what Kate was saying, I think there's been a departure from the original sharing of kind of the state of the different boards and where they're at and what's on their docket to inform one another's strategy. To the comment you just made, it's never intended or never did act as a group that made recommendations or took actions or deliberated on issues. It more frequently looked like when we were trying to crunch numbers, for instance, going into the building project, it's a group that might sit around and crunch numbers and look at impacts or talk about status of the different committee work that was going on with the building project. So it was an information sharing, not a deliberation or concept development and proposals were coming out of there. That has definitely changed over the past 18 months.
Okay, so I was just want to clarify, did you asked the question, can we? So yes,
Yes.
we can. So let's take Jake's comment and then if you wish to make that motion, all right, go ahead.
2 points. One, I was gonna ask that, have we actually made a motion? But the second point is, I agree that if it's simply information sharing, I don't think there's an issue, but it's clear that it's been framed as problem solving, which is essentially deliberation. So I completely agree with Erica and Kate, your amendment to this, which is let's make it open and then we'll participate. So I don't know who's
So that's,
making that.
so
I'm writing it.
she's writing the motion.
Point of clarification, while you're right, Kate. Does that mean that if the stakeholders came back and said, no, we've had legal counsel opine on this and we're gonna continue with collaboration meetings, we don't think it's a violation of the law that we're saying we're out?
Yes. And I will say, having had some conversations, I think that I don't want to overgeneralize, but there are definitely, the sentiment I have had from conversations with people on collaboration group currently is that it's unfortunate where we are, but understood. And the place we've gotten to right now is different from where we started. And I think that it would be interesting to see whether they would be willing to switch it to an open meeting.
What if, as I write this amendment, I'm wondering if it changes things if we establish that the members of our committee who attend the collaboration group are a subcommittee. Are a subcommittee,
That is a good.
It's a big difference.
right? Because then a subcommittee is subject to open meeting laws.
I'm not sure I want to go there with the amendment because I haven't thought about it long enough.
Go ahead.
Why do we need to decide now? So if they were to say that, the legal say that this is not against open policy law, that we are gonna continue because there are a lot of benefits, but we choose not to participate. I get that, we wanna all participate. But instead of voting on this now, wouldn't they sound more collaborative? If we say that, let's talk with both towns and all different parties, to see how we can work together instead of voting on now.
I don't think this is about, so the way you're using the phrase take a stand, I'm not trying to take a stand. The reason behind the motion is to say, we want to continue, we see the value in having these conversations, but there's active harm coming from them being closed conversations. We want to be able to have these meetings. If it's not done in an open meeting, it's not able to demonstrate the collaboration that is taking place or that is intended to take place in these meetings. And B, not giving us a chance to all fully understand the conversations taking place. So it's not so much about taking a stand, it's about revisiting the idea of making it work in a way that works for our full committee so that everybody has all of the information.
Why do we think that the other four boards don't have to take a stand on it's either public or nothing? They still find a benefit having that collaboration. So I choose to believe that there are some benefits. And again,
What are they though?
What are they?
What have they been this year?
I don't know yet. It's awesome.
I've not seen any.
And I think there's only harm coming to our committee by having these closed sessions.
My counter, and I think would be that it is not us. If the rest of our partners came back and said, well, we consulted with legal and they said these don't have to be open meeting laws. And so we're going to continue to keep them closed. It is not us choosing not to participate at that point. It is them choosing for us not to participate.
No, but we are choosing right now to not participate.
No, we are choosing to participate in open
they're
meetings.
open.
If anyone were to come back and say, well, we only want to participate in closed meetings, I think that the public's first question should be, why are you only willing to participate in these meetings behind closed doors? And why are you not willing to engage with the school committee in public?
Yes, Erica, please.
I think that it seems pretty clear to me that open meetings are not only better for the committee, they're better for the public. That said, I understand what Anna's saying, that collaboration is so paramount right now. I am concerned about taking a stance that would take us out of the game if the direction of these meetings went differently. So I hear you. I don't think they've been valuable. They haven't been valuable to me. I agree with Kate. I don't feel like I understand what's going on. But if our only option to collaborate is to move forward and that it's given legal blessing, I would be reluctant right now, especially after a pretty divisive vote last week, to say we're out entirely, because I feel like that sounds like we're taking a stand whether you intend it to be or not.
Okay.
For the sake of time,
Yes.
can we get
Well, this is
the amended motion on the table?
I amend the motion to state that the school committee will continue to participate only in open collaboration meetings.
Second. Okay, so now that is the motion that we are discussing. Okay. Everyone can feel, I mean, we show how we feel with our vote on this, and that's why we work by way of motions to bring forth an issue. And so is there any further discussion on this issue?
One other thing. Can't we just propose to our town partners and say, hey, we'd really like to continue with this. We'd like to continue with it by open meeting. We don't have a legal sign off yet. Let's plan one for next week and let's have a deal.
We did that. We did that early on. I can pull out the summary. When we first started discussing this in late August, early September, we did exactly that. And the response from the majority, again, because we work by majority, the response from the collaboration group was no.
That was before there had been an issue with it for me. I would suspect that when.
So I was there too, but it wasn't just a hard no. It was like, let's do what how it is right now. And then if it doesn't work, let's revisit.
But so also,
I think we're essentially saying.
this concern,
Even if it wasn't a hard
About-
no, it was still a no.
this concern about these meetings being closed to the public was raised 12 days ago. And there has been no response from the collaboration group or from any town partners.
Response meaning,
They have made no decisions.
is it for them to make decisions? I don't know.
Well, I would assume, I mean, somebody has to make the decision, so why can't it be us? We're sitting here.
We need to.
Are we gonna sit, I mean, last time we were told that we did not move quickly enough when it was suggested that we should be looking at an operational review.
I asked the.
Everybody sat around and waited for somebody else to take the first step. Why can't we take a step?
I asked the town administrator from both towns, what is the next step? So what's the next step? They said there is a 30-day to move forward. There's a 30-day to do nothing, and then they can decide, or something like that.
I think that's
Okay,
if
I
there
also
were a
met with the
complaint
town
filed.
administrator. There's not a complaint filed. This was, we chose not to meet that day because
Concern.
there was a concern was raised, so in an abundance of
I guess
caution.
I'll share this
Yeah.
just for what make it for what it's worth. I'm not the attorney at the table. But if we're having votes and we're starting to act more like an elected body, just by the way we're characterizing it here. It will not take long to get an answer on this, because I think if you look at the guidance on open meeting law, odds are it's going to be, if we ask, it's good, we're going to be told that you should be posting these meetings. Again, I'm not an expert. It's just, we've been doing these meetings a long time. We have an established subcommittee, as Kate's saying, attending it. So I'll be surprised if we're not given the advice that they should be open. I'm happy to take and run with getting the advisory and trying to get that within a day or two, if that helps in any way. I really don't have an opinion other than that, I think.
I think it helps, but also this vote,
The conversation here makes it sound like there's deliberation, votes, majorities.
well.
But that's here in open meeting.
No,
No,
she's saying that
within the
that
collaboration group.
they
Well, that
are
was one
saying
of the
the
norms that we
collaboration group
specifically
operates
looked at.
by majority. And so they
That
voted
was.
not to make them open.
So again, in the sake of time,
Yeah.
I'd like to
You're
move the question.
Move the question. Move the question. Do we have to do a thing after that? Do we need
Do we need votes to move the question?
Say all in favor. All in favor. Okay, so all in favor of the motion, the amended motion on the table, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all opposed? 2, the motion carries 5-2. Thank you. We will,
Could somebody just read what we landed on?
The school committee will continue to participate only in open collaboration meetings.
Should communicate that back.
I'll communicate that back. Anna wanted to bring forth a conversation or a motion.
Yes.
So-
With Abby transitioning, and collaboration meeting pending, I think at the time, we paused the.
Hold on.
finance subcommittee.
I just want to pause so we do it in the same format. So make a motion
I
and
make
then we'll get a
motion to-
second and then we'll have discussion.
I make a motion to reactivate the finance subcommittee.
Second.
So now explain your,
So earlier this academic year, we decided to put the finance subcommittee on hold because there was a collaboration meeting. The idea is to talk about budget, the primary topic, to collaborate together to talk about budget, whatever that might be. Since that is on hold, and we have the director of finance in transit, and there is not enough time during between 6 to 9 p.m. every other Tuesday, I recommend that we reactivate the finance subcommittee. And that allow us to, kind of similar to the program subcommittee, that it allow us to ask a lot of different questions to make sure we feel comfortable. And there are so many budget and finance questions that we have right now. And we also need to, for example, potentially we talk about changing the presentation. It's more straightforward. Potentially we need to have a communication plan. What does that look like, or what? So while budget and finance related things is good to be talked about in a full body, there are many different things that need to be discussed at the subcommittee level. And I do think it will save us time to do that. To give everybody an example, the last meeting when I was asking about the budget transfer, that we actually reducing salaries for more than 200,000, but we're only asking for transfer for like 140 or 110, whatever it is. In my mind, that we are actually putting close to $100,000, if not more, on the table, because at that time we could say, oh, then potentially, maybe we should hire the librarian and feel that our librarian that we don't have, the middle school kids can have access to the library, things like that. So without the kind of lengthy discussion and the back and forth, doesn't mean that we are trying to validate, find errors in the budget. It's just a lot of back and forth, healthy discussion needs to have for us to manage our budget properly. And so I recommend we reactivate that. And I also recommend that we have 3 people, finance subcommittee.
Okay, so you may already made one motion of reactivating the finance subcommittee, so we're gonna hold off on the adding people at the moment. Let's
It's gotta
discuss,
be activated first.
so,
We could amend this and do it both at once.
Well, it could be separate.
I think
Some
those are
people-
separate issues.
Yeah.
Those are separate issues. Okay, so I have my thoughts about this, but I also am open to an idea. I am mindful right now of, the fact that we haven't actually discussed an open meeting yet, but we have received notice that our, Director of Finance and Operations, Avi Erbus, is moving on to greener pastures. And, his last day will be December 5th, my understanding. So
13th,
he'll be here for tentative budget.
Boo, and congratulations.
Yeah, right. Boo. Dislike,
And congratulations.
all the things, man, we're very happy for you. But we'll save all the mushy stuff for the next meeting. So, but with this, I am mindful that there's going to need to be a lot of time made available for Pam to either train a new person, work through the roles if there's not an interim right in place. And so if I were to support this, I would really feel like it needs to be on an as-needed basis. That's how the finance subcommittee used to meet. We met as needed. Actually, we mostly met in comparison with the collaboration group. Because I want to clarify, I'm the one who brought that change forward in the first place. And it was not because collaboration group was handling these conversations. It was intentionally not that. It was specifically because I think this year, of all years, we all need to have that. I think it's very valuable for all of us to hear your questions and comments about the transfers. And I think it's valuable for the public to have that background as well. So I'm not saying I'm for or against, I'm still listening right now. But I'm mindful of the time commitment. And also the original, I just wanted to clarify for you because it wasn't the original character, the original change was not for that reason. It was so that we were all having the conversation together at the table. Go ahead.
So, while I appreciate that, we're now in mid-November.
Yeah.
And we really haven't had those conversations yet. And I don't see us having enough time to do that thoughtfully in the way that I think you're intending. And I very much appreciate what you're intending. I just don't see us being able to do it. So I think, whatever as needed means, I think it, particularly given how collaboration is working or not, and our challenge in finding time in these meetings, because we're going to end at 9 each time. I think it's helpful to have a couple of people working more directly with the district on these issues. I would agree with that.
Any other comments? Any other discussion on this motion?
Pam, can you give us a picture of the time commitment between finance committee, collaboration group, and what you are expecting the process will be to find a new hobby, which is impossible?
Think of the mountain. So we're trying to meet fairly regularly the program. There is a lot of in-between work to get some of the data prepped and ready to be shared. Like Julie and I met for 2.5 hours looking at some items the other day in preparation for our meeting coming up on the 29th. I probably spent about 2 hours last night working through some of the spreadsheets just to kind of clean up. So I would say for every meeting, for every hour of meeting, there's likely 3 hours of prep on average to go into it. I have no opinion on the finance subcommittee. I just know that we are going, right now, we have to prioritize our work in office. And right now our priority is trying to build the budget out to the extent where we just have to make small adjustments as we go through iterations going forward. So we're on a full court press to get that done, type some things up and get people prepared on function that they're gonna have to carry through the unknown period. I had it in an update, I can do it right now. We are, obviously, we have the ongoing search. We're posted for both an interim and the permanent position. In speaking with, MASS and MASBO, more in depthly with MASBO, they're the Mass Association of School Business Officials, the market's shifted. So she said, don't wait and post at the end of the year, just go ahead and post for permanent right now. If you have an interim that you come across that is a good fit, go with that. If you haven't found the person, but if you can find somebody, you're going to want to take them. There are 5 open director of finance positions currently in the state that I'm aware of. There could be more, and there aren't candidates. We've been referred to potential interims who have strong references. Both are already engaged, working in another district. We are working hard to recruit some potential mid-year candidates. So while the process is going to be kind of an abbreviated version of what we've done in the past, it's going to be rolling. If we have a candidate that's high quality, my goal is to convene the team the week after Thanksgiving or the first week of December. The team will be school people, school committee reps, and town reps on the board to meet with the individual, assess their qualifications, and then if we want to proceed with 1 or 2 people, then we would bring them in to meet other people in the district, or to try to shorten that timeline as much as possible. So I think I've learned that in this instance, flexibility is a big piece. It's a different role. It's not like a principal where they're the interface with the parent community and the students. It's lesser. I mean, it's much more on the board level, and we'll have those people right at the table. So long story short, optimistically, if we were to find a candidate prior to the holiday break, that person probably owes, if they're employed 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, in some instances before they could take over. Sometimes there's ways to work that through. So I think we're not really sure what the in-between period will look like. I would say, other than the budget, we're in a good position to make our way through this because the bulk of our compliance reporting is done at the beginning half of the year. It won't kick in again until the end of the year. So budget and staff management, office management, forecasting will be the primary pieces that we're working on. Things that will take a backseat. We're not going to be developing our capital. Like, there's a lot of the project work that will have to go on pause until we have somebody new. So to answer your question, I'm happy to meet with the finance subcommittee as needed. It's just going to be a few hours, probably double time to prep for that, because I'm going to be taking over some pieces or working with someone in the office who's going to be running the spreadsheet behind the scene. And we're going to have to just adapt to each other. So that it will take probably twice as long to do everything, optimistically speaking.
Are you having a recruiter or the director of finance?
I have not, no.
Is that normal for any school district to use recruiters for their service?
Once in a while, larger districts will use like an SDEC or an MASC to go out and do it. But in speaking with MASBO, they're kind of the leading voice. I don't know that it would be run well still. There's just not a deep pool of candidates.
Anna, sorry,
No, I'll wait, go ahead.
Anna, what do you view the advantage of, the finance subcommittee between now and when we hire? With my follow-up question being, do you think it would be possible to table the finance subcommittee until we have someone a new hire in place?
Which could be 5 months.
Mhm.
I think it will be a mistake while we go through the budget process, than not having a finance subcommittee. It's very normal for any board, and we are $30 million organization. Not having a finance subcommittee to look at the finances in more detail, I think that would be a mistake. Especially we know that we're going into the budget. This is the second year that it's going to be very tricky. It's not just there should be other people, looking at the politics side, but there also should be people just looking at, running different scenarios. Like, everybody are kind of have different ideas, but we should be looking at, more comprehensively looking at the numbers.
So I think part of the reason that I see it differently is not because of the value of it on its base. It's because I see the purpose of it differently based on how I was trained and how I participated in it for the first few years. And so I can see where you're getting at. And that the purpose for you is frankly, more similar almost to how the policy and program subcommittee is right now. It's exploration in some ways. So I can see the value there of wanting to do that separately. The thing that I'm coming back to in terms of time then is if we do this, so, and Pam's saying that for every meeting, it's, roughly 3 hours of prep, that sort of thing. So if we're going to do that, what I do know is that every time we have a meeting, we have a number of emails with various, it's not as if everybody here, we don't all see each other's things, but I know there are lots of emails that go to Avi and Pam about specific items. Like we go through the Excel spreadsheet and we're asking those questions. So if we're going to ask of their time for that, then I think that those questions would better be directed toward the finance subcommittee to bring up in those meetings. At least to spare your time, not just to spare, but to create a venue for that and then a purpose in those meetings also.
I don't think it matters where the questions get answered.
Okay.
It's for you guys to decide. I'll work with the finance subcommittee and we can be purposeful in the work. I think that it's purposeful and that we have directed work it'd be fine. The work is going to be what the work is, whether or not we'll be able to do the voucher report the same way over the next 4 months, I'm not certain.
Yeah.
Because that in and of itself is probably a 4 to 5 hour commitment every other week. So we're just we're gonna need to be a little flexible and we're gonna have to prioritize what the key pieces are. I certainly, am disappointed that obviously I'm very happy for him in the new project that he's going to be able to take on. I think the opportunity here is to simplify. Because just looking at the assumptions, we are overcomplicating this process incredibly. There are just a couple of levers here. And it's healthcare and it's personnel. And the bottom line decision is, when we look at it, the growth, there were comments made at town meeting and I understand why this is hard to get our brains around because sometimes the way we talk about it. But the majority of our budget overwhelmingly is personnel and healthcare. Personnel will increase somewhere, depending on which category you fall in, between 2.5% for non-META or 3.75% for META. You're already spending more than you're going to get in your annual increase in assessment. And then when you layer on your healthcare, you're over, and that's it. That's the basis of the structural problem of the budget. It's not necessarily the choices that are being made. It's the annual inflation rate of the key drivers. And that's it. If we focused in on that during budget season, instead of going off in 17 different directions, I think that could really simplify and help people understand why we keep running up against this problem.
I think we're now in budget discussion, which we have later in the agenda.
We do.
Can we move the?
Well, I think it was valuable and pertinent to the question.
If you're looking for an opinion, I can see the value of having a subcommittee to meet with and run through things before we bring them. Especially as we go through a difficult period. What's not helpful is having to meet just for the sake of meeting and creating extra work on top of it. We're just gonna have to kind of feel it out as we go, I think. We're just
So that
honest with each other about what we can handle.
That's my
Move the
concern.
question.
Sure. So all in favor
Let's move the question.
of moving the question?
You don't want to move the question?
That would have
You abstain.
It has passed. It has passed to move the question. So all in favor of the motion as Anna presented. All in favor? Motion carries. All opposed. Motion carries. 5-2. Right. And then did you want to make an additional?
Well, if we are reactivating it, we now wouldn't vote, right?
Well, we have to form it. We don't have anybody on it.
Right, you have to.
Well, we didn't disband it. We
We
suspended.
put it on hold.
we suspended. So at the moment,
And the assumption was that it was Anna and Teresa.
That is still the-
Representative.
that is still the current makeup of it, yes.
But the subcommittee, members need to be voted in. And usually is it,
They already are.
but we didn't, at the time when we were voting for all the different subcommittees, we didn't vote the finance subcommittee.
Okay, I make a motion that Anna and Teresa continue as our representatives on the finance subcommittee.
Second.
Any discussion?
I recommend we have 3 people instead of just 2. Similar to the program subcommittee.
I think that on a finance subcommittee, it is very unwise of us to not have balanced representation between our towns.
I think time is getting awfully short to get 3 people together. I think we have trouble doing it for the
Very
policy
stressful
and,
for that.
and,
It's stressful.
so I hear your intent, but I think you have a win here by getting it at that time.
Take the win. All in favor, oh, wait, what was the question? So all in favor of continuing forward with Anna and I? All in favor? Any opposed? Carries. All right. Thank you all for that. That was a long subcommittee report, but it was important. There was a lot there. Negotiations, Kate and Chris.
Negotiations are ongoing. We meet again. December. Come on, Chris, tell me how I'm.
Meet again in December.
I think it might be the 12th. Hold on. Yes, we meet again December 12th. And we are hoping to possibly have an executive session to discuss what the association has brought.
So I think I had you're going to credit track.
Yeah.
So today was one of those days where we started to do it and tying up what we've said, and then we pulled the thread and we ended up spending 3 hours trying to unpack something that if we don't have the knowledge, get the knowledge now. we
Yeah.
don't Get it. So yes, well, I'm gonna get something out before I leave for the holiday break. At least with some dates for you guys to take a look at.
Okay. And also as a reminder to our committee that we are invited as silent observers. And it's very valuable. So we are there to silently observe the proceedings, but then when there's caucus, we are involved in that as well.
Yeah,
And our
I would
town
actually highly
partners.
Suggest, that's actually a good part. I would highly suggest that everyone on the committee, attend as a silent observer to our negotiations.
It's very valuable.
The 12th, the 12th? Yeah, I'll
At
send a
3:30.
reminder when we get back from break.
And just so everyone knows, our partners that are participants in the collaboration group have that invitation as well.
Are those the students or the,
All right,
that's up? That's winning?
policy and program? No,
We have not met.
no report. Okay. Superintendent's report.
Well, I already gave it.
Yes.
Most of it was just the update on the director search. And I'm gonna stay optimistic. It's just to follow up on Anna's question about recruiting. When you say recruiter, I think of something like paying NESDEC to go out and host the whole thing. We are using NASBO, you've heard me reference them, to do some recruiting in terms of interim and potential people who might want to make a mid-year move. So they've been advising, and they're probably most tapped in to folks in the state who have the experience that we need. So I don't know that gives me, I'm staying optimistic. We're gonna land this plane. My only other, I just had a few notes, our last release day was a big push to get the accreditation review underway at the elementary. So you've heard us. The high school has gone through the New England Association of Schools and Colleges accreditation process. It's a 10-year decennial review with different checkpoints along the way, which is a series of self-evaluations against learning standards, which are aligned pretty closely to what's expected from the state. And then a visiting team will come in and kind of check your work, similar to what MSBA does in terms of you're reporting this, you're observing this, but this is what we're seeing. And they come up with some recommendations. So the high school has completed its decennial review and has the recommendations and accommodations. That's all posted online. And to align the whole district around the work of the vision of the graduate, we have included in our strategic plan our interest in having the elementary schools go through that process as well. And this ties a little bit, not directly necessarily to the statistical information that Antonella was talking about, but to our desire to try and ensure that we have an equal experience in both buildings. Obviously, there's different cultures and there are some different challenges that each school faces, but in terms of core program and instruction, that should not be variable. So this process is being done jointly between the two schools, and the teams are commingled. So we will come out with one elementary set of commendations and recommendations and advice to go forward, and we'll hopefully, I know we have some challenges ahead of us, but I think comparatively, we are still a very successful school district and producing good outcomes for kids. And I would be very surprised if we didn't earn accreditation. Middle school is also involved. They had done NELs to help. They're the specialty group on middle schools. But our intent is to try to loop them into the EAS process as well when they come up again. So we should be, when we finish the elementary school, it should be middle school's time in the cycle. Yeah.
Two questions. The first one is about recruitment of officers.
Yeah.
When we were interviewing the new treasurer Glenn, I specifically remember that he has really good reporting and budgeting skill set. So are we utilizing him?
Funny you mentioned that, because that was always in the back of my mind when we were talking to Glenn. Glenn is firmly committed to being retired. And he was the first person that I had reached out to see if he'd be willing. I don't want to, put it. He can't he would have to abandon the treasurer position to take on the functions of the director role. And I don't feel like I'm airing someone's personal business. I don't think he's looking for that much of a time.
But is he able to help in the interim? That's what I'm saying.
He's not interested in taking on the interim role. That being said, he is there as an advisor and someone who can we ask and answer questions for us.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Now they
Not
can do
an
it full
official
time.
step. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Second question, the different, and all the stuff that you're looking at, to answer the previous public comment earlier, like now we know there are some alarming, MCAS scores in different schools and different grades. How are we incorporating into the different, what we're doing now?
Well, I think the principals outline what they're doing in each of their buildings in their last presentation, and we can always revisit greater depth if you want to talk about that. I know everyone is looking at some mid-year adjustments that could be made, particularly at the secondary, to address some of the issues. I know it's going out of fashion to talk about COVID, but I think we have to put some of this in perspective as well. I mean, nobody is pleased with the gap. I think we have historically had a gap in performance between Memorial School and Essex. So it's not that we aren't aware of it. And I think instructional practice, as we outlined in our last presentation, is the key to moving things forward. So while remediation is going to be helpful for some short term, I think we don't love the term learning loss, because essentially we hit a pause and we hit a slowdown through COVID. So I don't think we should be surprised that seventh graders who were learning from home aren't necessarily in the same place as seventh graders who were learning fully present were 10 years ago. And that's not an excuse. It's just a variable that we have to account for. So I think work is being done to figure out, work is being done to increase opportunities for kids to get some additional instruction. And more work is going into the long-term push to address why we aren't making greater connections to students who have obstacles to learning in the classroom environment.
I think that,
Hold on, Erica had her hand.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. We do these things orderly.
So I guess I want to comment and question. Comment is, to the extent that it was perceived that the school committee, or at least me personally, I'll only speak for myself, was not alarmed by some of the discrepancies. I think, I hope if somebody goes back and looks at the tape, it would show that we are, and we're really concerned. I was personally impacted by Sheila's report, which did really identify the challenges, really identified some real problems that she saw and a plan to address them. But I would like to ask that we not just identify it, but that we circle back to this and that we put it on an agenda not waiting until next year, but to see us making some forward progress toward these goals.
So part of our game plan this year was to have, one of my concern is the wrong word. Something that has been on my mind for many years is the fact that Avi is present in, this is nothing about Avi or the role, but the director of finance is present at the meetings. And that's an important function, but it's not a core function. It's an operational function that keeps things running and keeps the bills paid. And that's an important piece of what this body's work is. But we don't have equal representation from the director of curriculum. So we had set out on the year thinking that we would be adding to at least one meeting a month, a report out of the Office of Curriculum to do exactly what you said, which is give regular updates. It hasn't really come up necessarily in the past as an area of interest or need. It was satisfied by a lot of the reporting schedule that we had. But at this point, we just haven't been able to, I mean, we're at 3 hours already. I don't know. We would have to be committed to creating space. And I know she's at the ready and we have a concept of how that could look. Not that it would have to take hours every meeting, but if it just became a regular set of updates, I think would be helpful.
Just to,
Hold on.
I think Eric
Kate,
is.
wait, Kate was
Waiting.
waiting.
Just want to clarify a point here, because I think, Erica, you're asking for a very specific return to a point, and Pam, you're talking about a very general engagement of the curriculum.
I think I'm making the point that if we had regular reports out of the Office of Curriculum and Instruction, we could be giving more detailed updates by making space for it on the agenda. That's all. So it can cover many different things.
I like that idea, but until we have that, I think maybe it would be worth having as a placeholder that we do have a specific time that if we haven't managed to fit in the director of curriculum's updates, that we do make sure that by, what do we want to say, 6 months? By March, by,
Well, by the end of the year, we'll have our school updates as well. I mean.
Yeah, so the back half of the year, and this doesn't have to take
this is too long. Sorry, I'm
So
thinking like.
they're both Julie and, so the principals, Julie will be here in January to do the program of study. And typically with the program of studies, we also kind of get a progress report on things at the high school. So if there are specific things to the high school that we're interested in getting updates on, we can build that into that time. We also have on the agenda specific curriculum presentations, so to help you learn a little bit more about the K-12 sequence in each of the discipline areas. And those will be times when Heather will be here, and we can certainly build either subject area updates about progress into that. And then we'll be here again at the end of the year as a team to do our end of the year district improvement plan report, which is another opportunity where we can recap that. So I think there are several meetings that are coming up in the spring where we could provide updates on what we're doing to address. And if it's just Essex in particular, then we can ask Sheila to come.
So to that point,
Kate's not going to wait. too
I am
long.
not waiting, yes, to that point, I thought that it was great to have Sheila and John present collaboratively when we were talking about the elementary school improvement plans. Unless our committee members were able to attend the tours of both of those elementary buildings, I'm not sure that all of our committee members would be aware of the different responses in each of those buildings based on those scores, especially if you do not have children at Essex Elementary right now. I had a conversation with, I had a personal conversation with Teresa at one point about Sheila's direct response to the MCAS scores, which I was encouraged to hear, but no longer having a student at Essex Elementary, but having a student whose scores are included in last year's scores from Essex Elementary, I would have had no idea about those responses because I don't have a kid there anymore. So I'm not receiving those emails anymore. I think it would be helpful to have those emails going out to the greater community so that people can see specifically the changes that are happening in that building in response to those scores, because there are some big shifts. And had I not raised the concern with Teresa, who happens to still have a child there, I wouldn't have known about them.
And on that note, so I will, because my two comments connect right to that, is that that for the broader community to understand, like, for instance, I was very alarmed when the day that came out and was very concerned. And I think the very next day, as a parent, I received an email from Sheila that said, we have a school council meeting coming up on this date. We are going to dive in deep. And that is exactly what she did, and I attended. So she did a deep dive of this. So it's just a reminder to all of us that we're a package altogether. But she really did address it head on. And we did have at the previous meeting, a pretty comprehensive discussion about this, or presentation about this. I do think it does make sense for us to add in a spot, an intentional spot for a check-in about how's it going in real time. And I think we can build that into our winter agendas in the next couple months. But also, I think it bears noting that there's been a multi-year process also to finally align the two elementary schools. And it's a good reminder to all of us that last year was the first year that we had cross-district meetings at the grade levels and the working groups together, actually making sure that across the two elementary schools, they were aligned. So prior to that, we had two very separately functioning elementary schools, which had yielded some separate results in some ways, for sure. We're in process here.
Cross-district collaboration meetings on release days. What we did last year was align both elementary schedules so that it could be done more consistently.
But in fact, there was a big jump last year.
Yes.
There was a big jump.
Scores are wider.
Yeah.
Apart than ever, so, I guess maybe you're saying it's too soon to expect improvement, but.
I'm not saying it's too soon to expect improvement. I guess what I'm saying is there are a few things at play here, and I'm trying to be really careful about it, but we have a new principal last year and this year. And there's been a lot to go through, I'm sure. I was speaking as a parent. There's been a lot of shift in the way the building feels and that sort of thing. I don't know what things, but I do feel like Sheila was very forthcoming about these are the things that we could have done better at. And now we're going to do them better. So I do feel confident that she has a handle on it and a plan. I guess that's the thing that
And I think we
coming
should
back
set
to.
aside, because we could go for a long time. The initial numbers, the MCAS numbers weren't as alarming year one coming out of COVID. I think what the principals are trying to articulate is we're seeing the cumulative effect on the younger students. This is the elementary discussion. As in their earlier years, they were working from home. So we were very buoyed by the fact that the scores originally weren't as bad as we thought they might be. But now we have the second year backlash, so everyone's going back and re-examining and retooling and trying to find a just-in-time solution to get these kids the remediation they need to move forward. So I think there are a lot of variables at play. Not excuses, but I think we have to account.
But to that point, we have the same number of kids working at home at Memorial as we did at Essex Elementary.
I don't want to just start. That's all right. I think we need to get Essex had a lot of homeschool exits and a lot of homeschool reentries. If you look at the enrollment.
But not 70% of the kids who didn't pass.
I understand.
I'm just saying that I agree that COVID has an impact here.
I guess I would say we have identified the problem. The principals have accepted the problem, and now they're trying to put solutions into place. So we can go around in circles right now, but we can't solve it here at this table.
No.
If you want them back in January, we'll bring them back in January, and they'll give you an update as to where they are. I think they tried to show you where the kids were scoring this year.
Yeah.
And what they were seeing in terms of some positive looks for the coming year.
And again, none of this I think that this is valuable for us to have this conversation. I mean, because this is something that's the problem, is that because we didn't have this conversation about, well, wait a minute, Manchester's does look very different from Essex's.
I think another point that Sheila made that's very important to kind of get on the record is Manchester Memorial is not a comparable school to Essex Elementary. They both have different sets of DART comparables. And those DART comparables are established based on the size and the demographics of the communities that they're in.
Yeah.
So I think if we look at the dark comparables for Essex, there's still a lot of work to do, but it paints a slightly different picture. So there is a gap within our community. But we have to recognize that each community school is set into a different context.
Again, I just think it's fair for us to, because we're seeing from the comments that are being made, you know, by the public that it doesn't appear as though we're taking this seriously or concerned, but I think that there's a few different reasons that appearance might be the case.
Yeah, and if you
so
get
it's valuable for
I
us
would
to talk
strongly
about it.
suggest you encourage people
Yeah.
to contact the principal of the building,
Yeah.
who is the foremost authority on
Yep.
how that building is addressing those issues. I'm happy to speak. I don't like doing it off the cuff without having, you know, looked at some numbers before having a session. They can call me, or they can call the director of curriculum. They'd be happy to speak with anybody.
Okay, thank you for that general update. Okay, into continued business, it is 7:30, so we have 3 items to work through tonight. One is the outcomes from the special town meetings, the second is the fiscal year 25 budget discussion, and the third is school committee goals, which Jake had kindly put together a draft of and sent out prior to our last meeting, in fact. So the way I'm going to structure this is the first portion of this, the outcomes from the special town meetings. We're going to just give the outcomes of the articles that were pertinent to MERSD, so that we are all clear about what the outcomes were and where that leads us in the moment. Then with the fiscal year 25 budget discussion, our first bullet will be development of the timeline, priorities, and assumptions. And the second portion of that part of the conversation will be ongoing evaluation of budget suggestions and the ideas list. So when we're talking about things from the special time, right now in the special town meetings, we're just talking about the outcomes. If we're talking about the operational audit as an example, that's the most pertinent example. But anything further about that, we'll consider in that ongoing evaluation. Okay, so that's just how we're going to structure this. So for the outcomes from the special town meetings, we had 2 articles and 1 on the floor motion that were pertinent to MERSD. The first is Article 13 in the Town of Essex special town meeting regarding funding the portion of the field project that passed. So we now have the funding for reimbursement from Essex for the full amount that was apportioned to the Town of Essex for that project. Manchester by the Sea already had 800,000 apportioned or appropriated for that, and any balance left from that had been approved for borrowing, which we are not doing, and so they will handle that in the spring, is my understanding. Does that align with what you understand as well? Okay, I just want to make sure I'm characterizing that. Point is, it's good news. Yes.
Yeah, and you may remember from the memo you guys from the last meeting, the school committee should amend the fiscal 24 current year capital budget at some point during this year. And
Yeah.
that's on my transition list of open items to make sure when I go through, so that there could be an assessment charge to the towns so that they could make that payment that they seem to have agreed to make.
Yep.
And that would be revenue, and then the expense, well, let's just say that you would want, I think it would be in the plan, although this is something school committee will have to deliberate, would be to put that money back into reserves such as stabilization. It could only happen with a budget amendment anyway.
Yeah.
So that's something that would go to the towns, and typically when the assessments are changing, I believe that the towns would have to vote on that.
So is that something they will vote? No. We're not going to wait till spring. Would they need to do that earlier than
And they
that?
could do it in.
They could do it in the spring and it would be okay.
Yeah, so we don't, rather than work through the details now, I
Yep.
think the bottom line is that an amendment would need to happen
Okay.
to charge that money and to collect it.
Okay.
And so I guess they probably have, yes, let's discuss the details later. I just want to make sure that's on everyone's agenda
Got
for
it.
this year.
Okay. Thank you. Noted. The second bullet here was the funding of the operational audit, which was Manchester by the Sea, Article 3. Article 3, yep. And Town of Essex, Article 14. It did not pass in Manchester and it did pass in Essex. For our purposes tonight, that means that we are considering anything moving forward on its own merits and by ourselves, because as of this point, we do not have any official communication or ask from the Town of Essex based on the fact that they approved that. So unless and until we do receive that, we're moving forward with any discussion based on what we pulled together here. So on our own work. I'm going to limit this, because we're going to be able to talk about it. So can we put it to the broader discussion? Okay. And then there was an on the floor motion during Town of Essex Article 20, which was made by a community member to appropriate $200,000 or move $200,000 of free cash to the Town of Essex Apportionment Stabilization Fund, which was created either last fall or the fall before, to put money into to help smooth the spikes when apportionment is a factor. So that motion was made on the floor to spend some free cash on that, and it failed. So that is the outcomes from the special town meeting. And again, should we hear from Town of Essex with an official request, we will definitely deal with it then and discuss further. But it's up to them whether and how they choose to utilize the funds that they had approved for that. Okay, so now into the fiscal year 25 budget discussion. We start with developing the timeline, priorities, and assumptions. And Pam had really spelled this out, I think, well in her email. I'd like to read that in. The key question for the committee is, what are the parameters we want to establish for the initial budget, knowing that this is traditionally the high water mark? So, for example, we might choose a specific target percentage. We might choose a target based on the program scope of services. But whatever those parameters are that we were asked to consider and bring to the table tonight, now is the time. So as we get ready for that conversation in our head, you can see we do have, and sent out the fiscal year 25 budget calendar. So everybody has this. Does anyone have any questions about this? This is standard and based also on dates set through the regional agreement. So did anyone have questions about the budget calendar?
I just think that there's a typo on one of the dates. January 26th should be the 24th.
Wednesday, January 26th.
The 26th is a Friday.
January 26th.
So that might be the 24th. Okay.
Be a really fun Friday night though.
Nope, it won't. Okay, so no, a question about the timeline? Yep.
If this doesn't account for, we've talked several times here about needing potentially to engage the public in our budget thought process, our budget, how it relates to the program or whatnot. I just wanted to confirm that that's not reflected here, right? That the only thing that's public here are those two public hearings that are the traditional public hearings.
Yeah, the things that are reflected here are when the conversations take place and then the hearing. So for instance, initial budget discussion tonight, we probably will have exactly the kind of discussion you're talking about, like how.
No, I mentioned that we've talked several times about having conversations with the public. But
Oh, I see. No, those are not reflected here. If we wish to add
I'm
communication
suggesting
with the public.
Looking at that as your deliverables, those are the commitments that we have to produce we have to hold those hearings, we have to produce documents for those certain dates, we have to adopt the budget. law.
yeah, I'm not questioning these.
Yeah,
I'm not
but it
questioning what's
doesn't
here.
mean that it's not here.
The must do.
I just
Yeah.
want to be clear.
Got it. Did you have any?
I just wanted to note that there's also Thursday, March 1st, which was, it's Friday. So just, yep, another point.
I would-
You guys really wanted to do these things on Friday night.
Right?
So maybe just.
That's the delivery of the,
Certificate,
No,
yeah.
that's just a certificate, so.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, but. but.
Yep,
it's
no,
still-
I bet it does.
Because if you see anything
It's a
else,
leap
just
year.
Send it our way. Yeah, I think it's
That could be.
the roll forward.
Okay, so with that being the case, we are in discussion now on the priorities and assumptions. So Pam, do you want to start with assumptions or do you want to start with us sharing our priorities?
You tell me what you'd like to do. We can do it either way.
I would like to hear your, where you're at with some assumptions first and then let us get into the priorities and things.
And I guess I'll preface this by saying this is really just what our thinking is as we're building. So on the 5th, you're going to get available to me. And on the 5th, you're going to get the draft version of the tentative budget. Probably important to remind everyone. That the tentative budget is the high water mark. So we probably are most conservative, realistic, but conservative in building this because we have never gone up tentative budget. We've always gone down. Even in the year that we got our surprise 26% after budget healthcare, we utilized reserves and savings and made some cuts after we turned in our budget to the towns to address that hit. So just have that in the back of your mind if you feel like, oh, the initial healthcare number is very high and maybe we should take that. That's all up for discussion. But this is going to be our high water mark. And these are the things that we are thinking about as we build the budget. So let's see if this works.
Do we have a document?
I'm just sharing. You don't need to do anything with it. I'm just going to share my thinking, and this is just here to illustrate some of the thinking. I will happily circulate this, but this isn't even written in stone. This is what we know today and what we're thinking about as we set out to finish synthesizing the inputs. So end of October through this point in November, principals have been building their school-based budgets and submitting those to us to synthesize and build the tentative budget from. So
Can you make it even bigger?
gonna try.
Sorry.
That's okay. Those budgets include kind of a 3-year outlook on what they're seeing, what they think they'll need for staffing, up or down. They may be looking at reallocating things. None of that is represented in here. This is just the big key drivers of how we think they're going to move over the coming year. And I think this is where we can talk about really simplifying our process, and because if you look at it, there are really only.
Sorry, we're working across purposes. I will let you do it. Sorry, I was trying to be careful.
Is that your hand?
That hand is right over.
Puppy?
We don't want you to see that number. Secret number. There you go.
So I would say what this does is works to illustrate, if we start with our FY24 operational assessment number. So that isn't all funds, that's just the assessment dollars, because that's essentially what we're tracking in terms of available new monies for next year. We'll show you at the end that most of our other sources of revenue are flat, unless we're choosing to use more reserves or increase our school choice. So, yep.
Could you just clarify where it says 3.75% teacher salary?
I'm going to go through that. Okay?
You know where I'm going.
I know where you're going. So if we look at FY24 actual and assume that we have a cap of 2.5% growth rate for next year, that leaves us $636,000, $637,000 in new monies to address the inflation of our key drivers. And I think this is the simplification that we need to make, right? So 2.5 yields $637,000 in new money. We've got about 4 or 5 major categories, the top 3 being personnel. So 61% of the budget is personnel. Under personnel, you see the subcategories. Unit A, our largest group of employees, that's the teacher's contract. We'll move, we believe this is almost an actual number, but assuming the same number of heads this year, next year as we have this year, between COLA, which is 2.25, and step growth, it would yield approximately a 3.75% increase to teacher salary line. That right there is $500,000. So little room for investment and already setting up the need to look at other areas. Yeah, Anna?
Remember last year, we were able to, I mean, there's a big delta in the budget because the retirees. Is there any, how many retirees are you expecting, and are you expecting to all fill those? What's your assumption right now?
The assumption is we return all existing staff, teaching staff from this year to next year. So no change in teaching heads at this point.
Is that because that's actually your assumption that no one will leave, or is that just how you're drafting right now?
That's how we're drafting right now. Retirees will start to present themselves. It's depending on the position. If we exit a physics teacher, the savings could be $5,000. It could be $15,000 from one to the next. It's a little hard to predict until we know. But as we get the actual retirements coming through, we'll usually build those in January.
And what enrollment numbers are you assuming?
This year's October 1, which is it 12/21?
And growth? What's the enrollment decrease or growth are you assuming?
We're not factoring in enrollment into this.
Can I just take a big picture, step back, just to remind people how we build a tentative budget?
Yes.
Right now, the purpose of this is not to do, and I don't want to speak for Pam because this is her presentation, but just to remind people what our standard process is for when we have time to go through each of these details. Step one is to kind of lay out a high level budget by saying, how much money do you get with 2.5, which we're hearing might be in a non-override scenario, what you have. And then just from an overview, so you understand the size of the bread boxes, what are the major areas and what do those increases at a high level look like? Typically, we will do that plus even more detail with the tentative budget, which includes a lot of deep dives into some things, and we'll come with a tentative budget that says, here's what we're looking at, which may have even more specificity than this if we are arriving at a target assessment. But then we spend all the next couple months going through lots of scenario situations around enrollment or changes. If we know already something's going to change, it'll be in there, et cetera. The purpose of this exercise is just to show you
What we're building in.
where does 637,000 go at a high level before you do other things. So
And I'm gonna kind of stop him because we're going to have to change our process this year. Okay? And we're gonna have to adapt to new ways of hearing things because we're not going to be able to replicate everything we've done in the past. So what I'm trying to set up for you is as we build that tentative budget, that high watermark look, these are the numbers that we're going to use to build that budget. So just as he said, I would like us to minimize the number of scenarios that we're building out in January, not just because we're changing, but because we're going to try to put together a tentative budget for December that gets as close to the real number as possible based on the information we have right now. So, yeah.
So let's just go through, get through the whole assumptions, and then we can talk about the priorities, knowing that on the 12/5, we're
And
gonna
if
have
at
much
one
more
point we
detail.
want to talk about how we monitor enrollment and how that may or may not be able to tie back to an assumption of a head reduction, I think you're going to see principal budgets coming forward that assume flat heads and reallocation of resources to address some of the issues that we were just talking about.
Right.
Not only in the first year, but in the second and third year as well. So I think without giving it away just yet, because we are still processing, I don't think the theme of this budget is to cut just for the sake of cutting, but to show you how we could use these resources to better invest in ourselves and try to achieve some of the goals that we continue to hear about, which is reinstatements of elementary and sixth grade world languages, getting a plan before we get a person, but we're looking at libraries and how we can staff. So this is where it's going to come down to, if the committee, when we end this conversation, which was supposed to take about 10 minutes to just run through some high level numbers, right? The committee's going to have to decide, do you want a budget that achieves level funding? Then we know how to go into action.
Yeah.
But we're not assuming, we're not taking the first step forward to say we're just going to cut to reduce the level fund to a 2.5% growth. We are assuming assessment cap at 2.5 until we're told otherwise.
So let's say let's say it's 7:49, let's say we go till 8 with assumptions. So let's hold
There's
our,
not a lot here.
Yeah, I know.
Except to say,
8 at the latest.
Unit A
and then we
is
can
the
discuss.
largest group of employees that we have. We know with fairly certainly that they're gonna run at 3.75% increase because of their step scale and the 2.25 negotiated COLA. Stipends, resulted in a joint labor management act, side agreement, so until we reorganize the stipends are held flat. Also in that category is longevity. Longevity doesn't grow, it's a stipended number in the contract, so that's a flat growth for next year. Unit B, conservative assumption at this point, we're in negotiations, but it's budgeted at 2.5%, as we have budgeted every other non-META group for the past 15 years. In all non-META, that's principals, directors, secretaries, administrative assistants, custodial, every other person in the district who isn't a para or a teacher is also in at 2.5%. And you'll see just that alone basically is going to consume all of the growth at 2.5%. Health insurance, the initial discussion with USI, our broker, has put us at about a 4.5% high water mark for next year.
14.
What did I say, 4?
Yes, you did.
14.
That was-
14.
Let's clarify that for people in the back.
2.5% for next year. What we're looking at here, I know Anna was will ask the question, we assume the same number of employees on plan this year at this point in the game. So our actives, $381,000 at a 14.5% rate growth. Retirees, smaller number, 76, and then our employees on Medicare would be 50, and then our OPEB contribution at 87. So
Isn't that
Oh,
growth
you
like
can't see it.
double
I'm sorry.
last year?
Hmm?
Is that growth double what healthcare grew last year?
yes,
But compared to what it grew, no, 393 is the number in the final budget.
No, I'm talking about the growth rate, the 14.5. I thought we were at more like 7.
393 was the final number in the budget. 3.9 is the actual.
Oh,
rate
3.8.
Yeah.
So it grew at only about 4% last year, and we think it's gonna grow at 14% this year. That's,
the initial number is typically high.
Yeah.
And what they're telling us this year is our usage.
The usage is up a little bit. Our basic claims are running a little higher, but not terrible. Large losses, which goes through reinsurance process, is running it noticeably higher. And the medical trend is significantly up. I think we talked in prior meetings about that, and we heard from the town administrator in Manchester, who's on the board of Maya, that they're looking at numbers like 10%. So that's where this comes from. And so some of it is market and some of it is performance, and some of it is that it's still early in the process.
The optimistic outlook would be that we could get that down to 9% by. So this is a point of discussion for the group, which is how conservative do you want us to be?
Right.
And that's why we make the note of the high water mark, right? It's always easier to come down. But just those two categories alone, we already have a gap. District transportation is coming down a little bit. Tuitions will be going up. Not significantly at this point. This is the wild card category, which can look very healthy right now. This is a line by line analysis of who's in the system. What we don't know is if someone develops some issues along the line this year, becomes a candidate for out of district placement, or if we get a move in that has a considerable cost. Likewise, we could have somebody move to from here to a different community, and it could be a savings for us in this area. So this is another one that is a significant piece of the budget, and that we just have to continue to watch and can fluctuate throughout the process. So we tend to come in with the most conservative number. In this note, a note on this is some of the out of district tuition is also covered by circuit breaker. This is just what appears. Utilities, Avi has projected it's going down. We've already settled our contract, so it's just an added of usage from what I understand. And then if you take all the other lines in the budget and bundle them together and assume a cap at 2.5%, that's another $100,000. That's probably where we might look to make up some ground. If we're coming over, you can't see, just tell me to pull down because what I'm looking at here is different. What you're looking at there. So if you look at the increases of required spending, that'd be 1.3, reminding you that we started off with new money of $637,000. So you've got a gap, but we're also going to make some anticipations on new revenue, and this is up for discussion with the committee. Chapter 70, we get $30 per student. So the much discussed enrollment decline, we are hold harmless, so they're not reducing our chapter 70 by any reduction in our enrollment. But as a hold harmless, we would only get $30 per student per year, so it's not a significant source of revenue. The past 2 years, they have increased chapter 70 per head to $60, but not until the spring. So we've just started at the $30 rate. So it's either going to be 30, 36 or, high 70s. But it's not going to, we're not making up a lot of ground there. Two places we can make up some ground. We talked about investment revenue on top at 2.5%. School choice in, I don't want to go into great detail about it tonight, but I have been looking at school choice numbers from the onset of the district. And I think you heard me speak to it before that early on in the district, when our enrollment was around the 1,200 mark to 1,300 mark, we were taking in 140 to 150 school choice students per year. And that's direct revenue in and a direct offset to assessment. So that was running at about $750,000 to $800,000 annually. Not having that money has increased assessments to the towns because there is no offset there. I'm not proposing 150 students, but I do think we could look at a multi-year step in to bring us up to about 100 students. So if we assume an additional 20 students next year, and then another additional 20 students in the year after, we would get $200,000, $100,000 each year in additional revenue. That will help to reduce the assessments or suppress the assessments to towns. Reserves, we ended up with $287,000. I think we should consider going to 350 next year. We can debate that number. It's a small increase. It's a round number, and it's 60. It produces $63,000 additional dollars and helps to shrink that gap a little bit. So all said, if we accept the 2.5 as the cap, the small amount of chapter 70, but look to increase school choice and reserves, we can try to get the gap down to about $500,000 from a starting position. That's not great. It doesn't feel insurmountable. Obviously, if we went up half point or so in assessments, we would start to reduce the amount of cuts or reorganizations or efficiencies that we would have to make. And I guess I would just say, as you start to deliberate a little bit on what you're hoping to see from the budget, I'll say again, finding efficiencies, making cuts, and changing how we do business is not a problem. What becomes the challenge is finding the cut or the reduction or the reorganization that also has a lot of public support, because just about anything we do is going to take something away from someone or change it in a way that people weren't feeling it needed to be changed. So it's going to be rocky, and it's not impossible, and we can certainly do that. And we are very open to doing that. You'll see some suggestions on how we can create efficiencies in one area to invest in others as we roll out the budget. But change is never easy. So with that said, we have a little bit of work to do. And I'm kind of curious what you are all looking for. So we can do quick questions and.
Do we have any quick questions? Quick questions, because we want to make sure we get to share all our priorities. Quick questions.
What does 2.5% overall look like to Essex once it goes through apportionment?
I haven't run the apportionment formula, so I don't know. I think at one point, talking about an extra 1.5 on top of that as a box number. That was some of the numbers we talked about at the public hearing.
Anna, did you have a quick question?
Yeah, a quick one. So right now, the the bottom line gap is like 509,000. But that's assuming that they're very high potential insurance increase. But you mentioned that the idea is to bring it down to 9 or even lower. So if, and right now it's 14.5.
Yep.
What's the delta? If we were to bring it to 9%, what's the delta? What would it decrease to 509 by?
So the sum of those items is about $4.4 million. So you can assume 1 point is about $45,000. So if you save 4 points, let's just say, yeah, but that's actually, it'd really only be on the 14 and a half, so it won't affect the Medicare. So, so I'll get that for you now, but let's just say on that alone, 45 times 5 is what, 130, 270, 27.
It reduces the gap.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
we'll just keep watching it.
Yeah.
And in the context of the priorities, that may be something that you share as a priority. So to get this started,
I just have a quick,
oh, you have a quick question?
yeah,
Sorry.
just a quick one. So in the initial assumptions for school choice, would you assume bringing in students at the high school level,
Middle high school.
middle and high school level? Yeah, okay. Just because bringing in students in other areas would
We don't have any room. to bring
exactly this
students
over. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like our class sizes are already too high in certain areas.
Yes.
5.5 points on from 14 and a half down to 9 is 207,000. Again, when we say it's our plan, just to be clear, there's not anything we can do other than negotiate and debate whether we keep the same provider or not. Remember, benefits plans are collaboratively bargained, so we can't change the plan in the middle of the year. That's not an option. So it's just more about watching our claims as they come in, have a couple more months of data, and then trying to see what's available to us in the marketplace based on how we look and see what our options are.
Okay. So with that, 801, for the sharing of our priorities, this actually, let's structure this so that we preserve time to discuss the following point, which is that ongoing evaluation of budget suggestions and the ideas list. So this is our sharing of our priorities for this first high watermark budget with, again, as much detail as we bring to the table as requested, knowing that the process will be different this time around, hopefully not having so many iterations because we have a different way of going about things given the situation moving forward. So I will lead out by saying, here's how I am envisioning my priorities for this budget, for the tentative budget in December, are to focus specifically on our strategic initiative number 4, which is to maintain a sustainable multi-year operational budget and capital improvement plan. So I'm looking at the idea of this multi-year operational budget. I'm not saying you have to have it all spelled out, but within that, my priorities are, I would like to see a budget that preserves the scope of programming we currently have, that incorporates what you determine are reasonable principal asks based on the presentation that they gave us last week and told us that they will be building in, that incorporates a plan. It doesn't have to be the numbers right away, but a plan over the next couple of years for some of the key things that we hear from about community members, which would be the world language, performing arts coordinator, and then also in the multi-year priority. This is my priority, so I'm going to share them first.
I'm just asking, are you talking to Pam or are you talking to us?
I'm talking directly to Pam. I'm sharing, this is what we're doing. We're sharing our individual priorities with Pam.
Individual priorities.
Yes, we're each going to take a chance to share our priorities, and then we can see if there are any that overlap and move forward. Yes, I'm in the middle of it.
I mean, you're sharing them with each other too.
Yes, I mean, we're all here. I'm just telling you.
guys come up with a consensus list, then I'm gonna.
The purpose was to come
Yep.
with this.
Yep.
Okay, you're looking at me like I have 10 heads.
I have no documents in front of me. I have no, all I had was the bullet that says develop priorities. Like what if,
In the email, as I just read, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page because I think we are. In the email from Pam, I'm not making.
You can direct them toward me, that's just fine. It really is just kind of what is the scope the school committee is thinking about for the year? You know,
The
are
school
you,
committee, not individuals.
yes, but you need to share your
We
individual.
have to share our individual purposes
That's
here.
why I was asking if you were talking to Pam or to
Like,
us.
I just need to know, are we going out and like next week, we're putting together a level funded budget? Is that what you want to see? Is that the course forward? You want a level funded and a level service? Do we never want to use the word
Right.
level service again? Do you want us to cap, we assume to cap at 2.5? Because that's what we're hearing is basically the high water mark, for one of the communities. You say, nope, we don't accept that. We want, give me a 5% budget. We want to see all, like, that's what we need, the big picture. So the
Yeah.
same level of these assumptions, which is high water mark, what do you want? What
Yes.
are you hoping to see? Are we
Yes.
somewhere all on the same page? Because we can adjust our page if the committee's in a very different,
So I'm gonna finish mine.
I'm here to listen.
Okay. So demonstrates at what point we get to answer to our community members on world language and performing arts coordinator, and an upcoming issue that non-META 2.5% is rough. So it may not be this budget, but if not, then in a multi-year budget, at some point, we're going to need to address that. I would like to see in this budget, if possible. I can't say specifically, but I would like to see it. I would like to understand if it's a possibility to take a more aggressive approach with OPEB, or if, and how that would impact our long-term strategy with it, given that we weren't able to make much headway with retiree healthcare. And then finally, with those things that are my priorities, what reserve use would be required to get that to the 2.5% that would get Essex out of territory? That is my priorities for understanding this budget, knowing that we're not going to go through 15 different iterations of it. I'm giving you all mine right now. That's what I thought was the ask. Who would like to go next? Chris.
I'll go next, yeah. I think I've voiced this to you a couple of times already, Pam, but so everyone can hear it. So since I've been on the school committee, we've been making reductions and cutting programs and programming. And as you mentioned, if we're going to start at a high watermark, I personally would like to see, a high watermark of what those putbacks would look like. I think it's important to understand, especially since we have a very new committee from, I think actually almost an entirely new committee from 4 years ago when we started making cuts. I think it's important that we all can get a view of what those cuts have been. We can discuss a little bit about how they've impacted our program, impact how they could have potentially, impacted the program in Essex Elementary, right? So I'd like to understand that. Even if we don't, I know that we've discussed before with world language at the elementary level. I think that's something that we've heard from all of our, stakeholders that we would like to see returned in one way or another. So even though that program may not be ready right now to be returned because of everything that's been going on for the past, 2 to 3 years, I'd still like to maybe even get an estimate of what that would look like. If it's not this year, what that would look like next year. So I'd like to start where, I'd like to start at a level that I'm comfortable with, that puts our students first, which I think we all should be doing as a committee. And that should be our starting point, right? And then from there, we should all be then taking into account all of our other stakeholders that are involved in the school district and work to make sure that we come in, our final budget comes in where it's, workable, right? But if we're starting, again, I think our students should be first. So if we're starting here, and I'm not sure if here, what we just saw is what is actually best for our students. And if we're starting here, then we are, in my opinion, disregarding what should be, the first stakeholder that we take into account and what we look for in a budget, right? And then Once we understand what that should be, at that point, we can start collaborating with our town leadership, with stakeholders, parents of students, with students themselves, and with the general population and taxpayers that we represent here as a committee.
Does anyone else have priorities they would like to share for this budget, knowing that it's traditionally the high water mark?
So I went about this differently. In the past, when we've seen the columns of the different budgets and had to choose between them, I was trying to envision what each of those budgets really represented. And so to me, a big part of this conversation comes down to our definition of level services, which I don't think that we have ever really discussed. And we have received feedback that we don't have a clear definition of level services. So for the purposes of this discussion, I want to clarify that when I use that phrase, what I mean is the same level of services to students that were provided in the prior year. So that means the same breadth of course offerings, the same academic support programs, the same access to counseling, same levels of staffing, does not mean zero staff reductions, because reductions due to attrition or declining enrollment can be made without impacting services that students receive. So I'm not saying that we have to all accept that definition, but that's what I mean when I use that phrase. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to see, I was trying to decide whether I wanted to see a level services budget. Did I want to see a budget based on available revenue? And really what it came down to for me is that what I want to see is a budget that is designed to meet the needs of our students. And I don't think that any of us can give any more nuanced or insightful guidance than Pam and our principals can about what the needs of our students look like right now and this year. And I think that it is reasonable to expect that the needs of our students this year are not the needs of our students last year or the year before. And as we're seeing, there are trends that are concerning that are going to require services in order to meet those needs. So I don't think that using the phrase a level services budget is going to help us bridge any of those gaps. I'm always confused when I hear criticisms about performance paired with criticisms about spending, because the two to me are so closely linked. And I think that I heard in our presentation from the principals that what they really felt they needed was instructional coaches to help our teachers to respond to increased needs in our student population. So my only guidance is that I would like to see a budget that is designed to meet the needs of our students this year.
Okay. Jennifer, go ahead.
I'll go and I'll build on what Kate just said, because I think we're saying a lot of the same things. Personally, I've never liked the idea of building a budget to a certain growth rate. It doesn't work in my head, and I understand fully why it makes sense for you guys. But I think that's both doing too much and too little. So I'd really kind of rather remove that from our conversation and focus on what we really need the budget to accomplish. And there I'll echo Kate and say that, to me, I'm a data person, and we just saw a lot of data. And I also think that the more that as we tell the story of what we need for our budget, the more we can rely on data as the reason we need it, the more we have a narrative that the public can understand. And to me right now, there's a very clear narrative of some needs in our budget for some intervention. And whether you call that, like Kate just used a good education more, that I don't remember. So I'm just going to use interventionist. We need to find room for that in the budget. And it may be that can be found because there's some shifting that can do, and that's for you guys, that's not for us. But I do want to see a budget that speaks to what the data showed us. And then I also would like to see what the budget would look like with a plan for adding world languages back. So those are my two biggest priorities. We are still playing with things in the policy subcommittee to try and think of how all of that shakes out, and I don't think that's for today's discussion. So, sorry, let me just, before you move on, make sure, I think I have one more comment. Computer froze. Oh, and I just wanted to echo that, as a revenue source, I support that. And not only do I think that school choice, when we're talking about middle school and high school, I completely agree that elementary school doesn't make sense for a variety of reasons. I don't just think it's a good revenue source. I actually think that there's some good, again, data to show why a high school, at least at a certain size, has benefits for all students. So not only is it increasing revenue, I think it's actually increasing learning opportunities, and I think that's really productive. So that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. Jake?
So I'll echo these, maybe we have a theme going on here, but I think Kate put it in the context of student needs. I'll put it in the context of a budget based on the education program and the vision. Eric, I appreciate your commentary that it helps explain to people what it is we're actually funding by doing that. But to highlight, what are our core responsibilities as a public education entity? And so to me, starting with, framing this as a percentage issue automatically puts you in this gap conversation. And there's no grounding in what that actually means for programming and students. So to me, we can reframe this whole thing and really help us and people to see how the budget actually supports the educational program, the vision, and our core responsibilities.
And, yes. Everybody all raised a very good point, so yes to everything above. But in addition, I would like to see in this initial budget, not so aggressive in the healthcare assumption. So that way we're not dropping down so significantly towards the end, it makes us look bad. Second one is I would like to see incorporate some kind of enrollment assumption, not just status quo. And what does that look like? I would like to also see increase in an effort to see what it looks like to increase revenue. Last year, we talked about athletic fee, we talked about advertisements, even though it's chump change, but it could be 80, 100,000. It could be a interventionist, it could be something. So I would like to see we are making an effort to explore all options.
Thank you.
John?
I'll just say that I want to make sure that we're maximizing the resources we currently have. And that goes towards the curriculum aspect of it. There's obviously a lot of kids that need to get up to speed. And I want to make sure that the staff, everybody's doing what they can to effectuate that without this simple idea of just throwing more money at the problem. And I think we owe that to, the taxpayers, to everybody involved. So I think there's improvement there that can be done. Like, frankly, I don't think my kids get enough homework. And I feel like some teachers, they show too many YouTube videos during the day and not enough actual instruction. So little adjustments like that. And I'm just being honest, this is what I see. And I think, enhancements and adjustments like that could go a long way to improve the educational quality. So that's my 2 cents.
That's what's, not specifically the YouTube thing, but when the principals talk about tier 1 or classroom instruction, that's what they're talking about, the effectiveness of instruction to meet the identified needs. So we have a lot of identification, right? So we have a lot of data that's telling us a lot about where the kids are at. What some of the choices we're making about how to address that aren't showing the results that we want. So that's what we're meaning. We're talking about tier 1. That can be serviced by instructional code, but we can also get there in other ways. So I don't think we just need to throw one into the phone. Can I share one other piece, Joe, please? I very much hear you on the building to a percentage. It's funny because we started talking about collaboration, and I feel like that was something, I know that was something we were asked to do, to back away from many years ago, having the discussion very straightforward about this is the limits that you have. This is how you're going to build to it. Don't bring us a tentative budget that shows 10% pie in the sky wants. Show us your needs and how you're going to get there. So I think if we're changing direction, I'd like the committee to have consensus on that, and it does not matter to me, there's much more value in us talking about what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish and where we need to invest to increase outputs. It's just, that has been an ask in the past. That's all.
Jake, go ahead.
So, Pam, in my comments at least, I'm not suggesting go high in the sky. And I'm still suggesting that we focus on need. But justifying and framing it in the program needs, right? Not the percentage needs. Right? I think we still have to honor, that the towns have a situation they need to wrestle with, and we want to do what we can to contribute to that. But if all we think about is the percentage, then we do disservice to the program. So we need to, reframe what are our program needs. So I'm not saying go high in the sky, but what are our program needs, and how does the budget support that?
So do you want us to, I get it. I guess I'm asking, I don't think that I think the percentages acted as a governor more so than anything else. So, we could come and reinstate all of the pieces that have gone back and start to put back some classroom teachers, which is ideally, that would be our want, right? It may not be our immediate need. So do you want us to just build a total needs-based budget, bring it out over 3 years, put it all back in the first year? I'm not talking about building to a percentage, but what, are there any guardrails you'd like us to put on?
I would say, so my guardrail is this, that when I'm considering all of this, I want to maximize the amount we can bring in between school choice. Again, my question about OPEB fees is on the list as well. That's the fee structure that maximizes as much as we can bring in, keep costs as low as we can, and see where it is when we're then actually meeting the needs of our students, like answering to the questions of what the principals are asking, not so much what I'm asking, but what the principals are asking for and saying they need. But for me, so it's an interesting, Pam and I actually had a conversation about this. So our group does function differently than prior groups, and prior groups did ask specifically to work that way. Because they had a different understanding of the program and different experiences in different ways, different point in time. But our group does prefer to process this in terms of the program. So I think that is what I'm universally hearing. So, if it would help you for us to take a vote on it or a straw poll or anything like that. At the same time, my guardrails are, we've got one town saying 3.5 was always the agreed upon, and we're still good there. And we've got another town saying, I can barely make it at 2.5. So I feel like at this point, we have to determine where.
And I think that it is also important for all of our stakeholders to know whether or not we're basing it on 2.5 or 3.5, what the program would actually look like and what the budget would actually look like if it were designed to the needs of our students versus to those numbers, because we have never seen a budget that is designed, at least in my tenure on the school committee, that is designed to needs versus numbers.
Or we may have, and it just wasn't explained to us that way also.
Right.
Yeah.
I think part of the challenge in trying to answer your question is that what I'm hearing in the community conversation around these issues is that there's not necessarily agreement on what a program need versus a program want is. And I think by framing the budget in terms of educational program, that allows us to get the kind of input that allows us to kind of make that judgment a little more effectively. That's my hope at least.
See that. Does this give you a sense of where to go?
Yeah, can I put an elephant on the table and ask for feedback?
You may.
Last time we looked at addressing some needs, and maybe there was some gray area with want, but looking at reinstating something like the late bus, which I think is a need, the elementary world language, which is need want now, it's going to become a need because expansion to elementary world language is on the move. We got a lot of blowback for not being considerate of the realities that people were facing. So how will the group help us address those? the blowback, or address the fact that when we were very proud that we were building a high school program based on student voice and choice, we got tremendous blowback about needing to be more restrictive and not taking charge, and students shouldn't be making those decisions. So I feel like we're getting some,
That did happen.
I can only support student need first. That's my responsibility and my job. So just any advice or support, or how should we approach this?
Well, I don't think that anybody has given the green light to go on a spending spree.
I'm not
Because
talking about spending
we all trust, we all trust your judgment relative to,
We got derailed last year when
Yeah.
we started talking about what some of our wants and needs were. So
do you mean within our committee or do you mean
Well, yeah. so I
from
think you guys are
outside
talking
of
about
our
collaboration.
no, I'm talking
Not just there.
do you mean from
from our communities.
our community? So you're not talking about within the committee?
No, I feel like we were doing well, and then we started talking about reinstatement of different pieces. And
We have two communities who want two completely different things. And so we are going to get raked over the coals by one or the other, no matter what we provide.
Jay, share your thought.
So this is where I think we need to figure out how we, as the representatives of the town, to help Pam in her request, which I completely hear and agree with, we have to figure out how to engage the public in these conversations. Because it can't just be the 11th hour public hearing about cuts that are on the table. That's just reactionary. Right? Somehow we need to be a little proactive about this, and it's getting late, right? It's November. But we have to be proactive in this.
So the first step will be our public budget hearing. That is one good first step, that we want to make specific outreaches to say, this is the time to come and let us know. And it's traditionally just, the same 20 people who show up who have roles for this. But I also think we have a pretty good understanding of this also based on the fact that we heard from a lot of people this spring, and it wasn't only about one thing being cut. I mean, I had 240 something emails, and they weren't just saying, don't cut this one thing. A lot of them said that, but then they went on to, and the rest of them said, we care about educating our students effectively. So I think to answer your question, to me, I don't know that I can say confidently that this group is going to come to consensus behind any given budget. But what we need to do is work together based on just experience. But what we're going to have to do is work together to go through the budget so that when we approve a budget, we are then, as a committee, united behind it, because that will have been by majority of the committee. And so that's our responsibility to you, is to then support you in that, which we probably could do better.
What about in terms of this concept of public engagement and, I think your point is good. We should start the outreach to the community to attend the budget hearing, but I did last year and we saw all three of those people. They were here. But I'm not sure that gets us there. I mean, what about a survey? What about a wider outreach to our community that, and I am mindful as I say this, I'm not just talking about families are going to have one position, maybe not uniform, but they're going to express, and then we have a much wider community that is, we need their feedback as well. But what if we started with families and saying, what are we doing well and what aren't we doing well, and trying to have that help guide us in these budget discussions.
You have that in your strategic plan survey, and it was framed just like that. What are we doing well? What aren't we doing well? And where should we stop doing things?
And that was pretty recent. Maybe it would be helpful because not everyone was part of that. And so
But also it's broad. So what I'm thinking is so we keep bringing up, because it has, certainly in my case, it's been raised to me a number of times. What are we doing about the world languages? How are we proceeding? Maybe that's because that's what my book club cares about. I don't know, but it would perhaps be worth knowing rather than the strategic initiative, which is very broad in terms of our goals and objectives. There's not a line,
no, we're talking about the survey. The survey results.
Oh, and the survey results were that specific? They asked about world
Yeah.
language and so.
Oh, I don't know if it said world language.
I was,
Had
my
cut us at
memory,
that point.
my memory of that survey was that it was broader educational goals.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong. But what I was referring to is something that might be more discreet to really, in terms of line items, in terms of the late bus.
Mhm.
You know, is that, I don't know, I'm not in Essex and I've heard really radically different views from Essex townspeople who either think it's absolutely imperative or ridiculous. So I don't
Some
know.
of them get, I don't have the issue with taking feedback. I think Jake's comment about what our core responsibilities are has to come into play. So something like the late bus will never have popularity because it's looking to serve. I mean, we're a small percentage of students who are in need. And I think what we saw in the principal's presentation was that our low income number is growing. And that population may need additional services that won't win over anyone in a survey. So at some point, we have to be putting things forward for the greater good and to fulfill our core responsibilities, which would be access.
I agree. And I agree that, well, yeah, and I will add that I think that the late bus, that I never understood the relevance of the late bus beyond access to enrichment activities until I had a child in middle school and said, well, when can he come and get some help with math, or when can he come and get some help with reading? And the teacher said, oh, he can come and see me after school for 20 minutes after school. And I said, well, I can't pick him. He takes the bus home. I can't pick him up after school. And so as a general member of the public, my understanding of the late bus was that it would allow kids to run cross country or to play on the soccer team or to be in clubs, not that it was actually allowing students to get interventions that they couldn't access during the school day, because the other option was lunch. And so if we're talking about bridging learning gaps and improving test scores, then students need to have access to stay after school. But I don't think it was ever framed that way.
So to the broader question as well, though, about the community engagement. What I think would be helpful for me is to have, based on our input, we're the elected people, we're listening to the community, we're getting the input, we're getting the emails, we're getting the conversations, the phone calls, to have the high watermark budget presented as this, with recognition that I don't want the late in the game stuff. Like, we want to know up front what are the things that we're going to have to be really serious about. I don't think there's as much value right now in surveying the public for what things they want or don't want. I would rather spend our time and energy taking that information from our administrators based on teacher feedback and their work together. And then within the budget that they as our professionals determine meets the needs, then we get the community input on that in itself. I feel like that would be
Framed as needs.
framed as needs.
So you could see something along the lines of, if we all agree that we want to see improvement in student achievement scores, the interest in world language is one thing, but the need for additional support people is going to trump that.
Yeah. And I need to hear you say that as you prioritize the budget together, and then I can get behind that and we can come to understanding.
We got there backwards, which is the interesting thing, because that's how that got on the reduction list in lieu of something else, which was closer to the goal. But that helps.
I think the things that help in that conversation, Pam, is if you say, I'm proposing this because this is what our data showed, whereas a world language program is only offered in 2 out of the 10 surrounding districts. And making these up.
Yep.
But all those things, because for me, a lot of the time it seems very abstract.
Mhm.
I'm an educator, I'm not going to pretend to understand what the program should require, so I do look to you, but the more data you can give us, the better able we are, I think, to evaluate it.
So does that give you a direction that you feel you can work with? you have any more elements?
Well, I'll make a,
That's a lot to work with.
It's a lot to work with and,
I'll make a quick comment just about something that you said earlier. So, you mentioned that, you know, staffing class size is something that, you know, would be a high priority if possible. And I don't get individuals reaching out to me much in the community, but whenever I have over the past 3 years, it's been specifically about that issue. You know, it's not a very good, you know, hasn't been that often, so it's not very broad. But most of the time when I discuss anything regarding the school committee with the community, it's me bringing it up, being proactive. I very rarely get anyone personally, you know, coming up to me about that. When I do, it's specifically about that, you know, 2 years in a row. To be even more specific, 2 years in a row, have a more, yeah.
To have more smaller class size or to have less? When people don't.
Class sizes have gone up substantially in Memorial in the past 2 years.
I don't know. I think it is worth saying, and that's the art versus the science of enrollment. which
Exactly,
is-
yeah, I get it, and I,
It made logical sense by enrollment to make a reduction, but 22 and 23 feels too big.
Hmm.
So,
And 14, 13, 14 feels hard to justify.
right. So we get cuspy at certain points in time and there is no good answer to it.
So just friends, we are going to need to move along with this if we have given the input. So if these are very brief things so that we can actually get to the next discussion. Are they very brief points?
Brief fun fact. I grew up in a Taiwanese school system. School size is 60 for one teacher.
That is a very different, not apples to apples comparison.
Just a fun fact.
So,
I didn't say one way or another, I just said what I hear. If we're talking about community stuff and what I hear, that's it.
Just on the community part, I think we have an obligation to realize that we hear mostly from parents and typically from parents who have means to support things. There is as we saw in the data last time, there's a significant group of parents and families who may not have those means, who I don't think we typically hear from, and we have to be purposeful in engaging them. And the thing that I most lament about the breakdown of the collaboration group is that, you know, I think our town leaders are hearing from a whole nother portion of town that is feeling squeezed, that we don't hear from. And we have to figure out how to hear from them as well.
I would like to encourage you to be careful with that characterization. I hear a lot.
Yeah, I hear a lot too.
I hear a lot from people that have different perspectives. So
That'd be
maybe
great.
you don't, but that doesn't mean we
Well,
all.
it doesn't seem to get represented here, which we have to figure out how to do that.
I have a hard,
Are we supposed to?
okay, that's, I'm not going to
Let's
comment
move
on
on
that.
because we have a
How we
that
represent
time
that
here.
exactly.
I'm not sure either, but
People are welcome to listen in and join, so I don't know how we talk about that in the.
okay, all right. So I'll retract.
Okay,
So I'll
we're gonna-
retract my comment
we're gonna
then.
let's move on.
Again.
So the second point on the budget discussion, I think it's clear to say we're going to need to put school committee goals to the next meeting. Jake, again, kindly drafted based on our conversation. But just before we start this next budget point, because we're still in budget discussion, well, I'll save that for school committee comments. So ongoing evaluation of the budget suggestions and the ideas list. So I will just share with you guys, since we didn't really get to it last time, that I did compile the responses that I received. I received responses from 5. If there were 2 who did not respond to sending those prioritized lists in, so I have to assume that was by choice. So the information that I have here, just to clarify, we have a strong winner. Everyone who responded really wants to understand level of services and what that means. That is the only thing
Check, I
that
just took care of that. We're all set.
So I'm just reporting out. And then there were a couple other things that the next one down that was most popular was to explore class size options as a now for fiscal year 2025. And school choice revenue as a now conversation for the 25 budget. I will say that the third-party consultant operational audit did not come in strong. We only had 2 people say that they wanted to address that now for the 25 budget. At the same time, I think that's what we need to discuss tonight because of the recent votes. So what I would suggest is that we, in recognition that we have town leaders who felt that that would be a help in both towns. We did not ever get to consensus on how, like what that would look like. The presentation was not like a united, here's what we'd like to see. So at this point, we have a failed and a passed. What I'd like us to do is for us to consider if there are things or if there's support for either a third-party review or something similar based on either the whole big picture or specific items that we wish to take on independently of what's going on out there. Because we've got no official ask from outside right now based on what's going on. So this has to be our conversation now, for now, about what we are interested in and willing and engaged to do. So as an example, we could choose to say, we feel very strongly about this operational audit. We're willing to find money in our current year budget for, we're willing to ask them to find money in our current year budget to make it happen the way that it had been presented for $80,000 to $120,000. Or we could say, we like the idea of the DESI thing. I think Pam's got some updated info for us. We'd like to expedite that. Or these are just examples, they're not limiting. Or we could say, there are some targeted items that we don't have the bandwidth to take on ourselves, but we really need a deep dive on. And we could engage someone to do some targeted asks at a more reasonable level. So these are all options we have before us, but it's for us to decide based on what we have for resources at this point. So Pam, did you want to share your?
I spoke to DESI today regarding the district review process and the ask to see if we can ask to be put on a list for consideration next year. I don't think there's a line.
I'm shocked at him.
But he did say he found it intriguing in that actually it may not be as uncommon as we think, or it's emerging as a need. He was very helpful. He encouraged us to take a look at the reports similar to what I sent you. I think I sent you, it was a regional district.
Yeah.
So you had a sense of what they cover and how they cover it. And we will be brought up for discussion. I think they're going to, in the beginning part of the year, make their recommendations for who gets moved forward. So we will be considered, be put on the list for next year. They would come sometime between October and March, with a formal posted report to follow a few months after their visit here. So, there's data collection and submission, and they go through all of the different aspects. What I relayed to them was, what strikes me is they would bring in, and this is what I think is helpful about DESI, all of the knowledge of the things that we are supposed to be doing and what our responsibilities are to different groups of students. And they're not bringing in a model that, they're not going to propose a model to us. They're going to give us feedback on what we could do well, what we don't do well. So that we can potentially be in the pipeline.
So is that something, I mean, like, that doesn't even have to replace it. That's something that, I mean, do you want us to consider it, go, give you direction, or it's just already part of
If you
the?
want to go in that direction. I did ask him out of curiosity what the scope of this work, what this type of review might cost.
Yeah.
There is no cost to us, but it's approximately $55,000.
Okay.
The other organization I mentioned to you, and I think I mentioned it last meeting, is, I always forget it, it's NESDEC, it's the New England School Development Council. And if we are members of them, it's like a version of, they do some of the same things that Mass Association of Superintendents does, or MASC. They do a lot of executive searches, but they also have like a whole research, professional development, and kind of district support managed reporting mechanism. So you could get targeted reports from them. If we rejoined by paying our membership fee, which is, I think, is under $2,000, we would get a complimentary enrollment assessment multi-year, and then you could choose everything from, we could have them come in and look at program, you could have them come in and look at schedule, you could have them come in and look at many different things. I can send you more information on that. But that's another organization that's kind of a objective, professional organization that looks at schools all throughout.
Okay, so Erica, you had a question or a comment?
I was gonna start discussion.
Okay, go ahead.
Are you ready?
Does anyone have a clarifying question
No,
before
those
we
are,
start
and
discussion?
I'm not endorsing or
I know,
promoting, I'm just saying that's,
Yep.
those are resources out there for you.
Just a clarifying question.
Yeah.
From your understanding, do either of those typically make recommendations about budgetary efficiencies?
I would say Desi likely no. But in the reports that I've read for regional districts, they do address issues of apportionment and some community concerns in there. NESDEC, I would need to do a little bit more digging to see if they would come up with a prescriptive list of who should do these things.
I have a clarifying question.
Okay.
It would be dependent on what question we ask them to study,
That's-
and what we
yeah.
ask them for outcomes.
I don't know if this is an obvi question or a legal question. Are we allowed to spend $40,000 that Essex has voted to spend towards this review without also spending the Manchester's share of that?
Let me practice being without Avi, and he can correct me if I'm. The only mechanism we would have to get that revenue would be to amend our budget or for them to independently purchase the service.
Wait, could you
We
repeat
would
that?
have to amend our budget to take it in as a source of revenue, to then be allocated to this report. Or they would have to purchase the service independently as the two towns and provide it for us.
Have we ever done anything like that before?
I mean, our budget rules are, if it goes down, if it doesn't pass in one, it doesn't exist as a.
So
It's not
if, for example, at the next town meeting, Manchester said, well, we really want to bring back foreign language, so we're gonna put $80,000 towards an elementary foreign language teacher on it, and then they said, you may,
Can't do it.
so why is this different?
This is different because Essex could choose on their own to purchase the service.
They
We
could
would
purchase
just be
the
asked
service,
to
but we are,
comply with it. That would be the ask. If
We
that were the
would be the
case.
gatekeeper to staff and resources
Yes.
and data.
It wouldn't be us spending their money, that's right.
It would be us expending their own money on a service that ideally we would have some input on because we've got a grant access.
But for tonight, since we have 8:46, I really want to keep it to the scope of what we actually know, because right now, we don't know if Town of Essex is planning to actually spend that money, or,
so that was
We
my
don't
other,
know
I
what
think
their
that
plan
that's actually why I was trying to review that meeting and loudly
Yeah, I
blasted
think there
it
would
in
have
Nell's
been a-
voice at the beginning, which was to try to find during our town meeting, someone asked, and I cannot remember who, if it was Sarah or Annie or Teresa. Someone said, we know that this already failed on the floor in Manchester. What is the plan here if it passes here? And the town administrator, I can't find his response now in the video, but I believe he said, then we would come to the school committee and ask if they would collaborate with us on this, or something along those lines. But has anyone from the Board of Selectmen reached out to you, the Essex Board of Selectmen, or you, or anyone about
No.
this?
no. And I think that, while that was a helpful indicator in the moment, that would have to be something that the Board of Selectmen would decide on and then together whether or not to pursue. So I don't know that that was completely accurate.
This is just, very just objective sharing. I think had it passed, we may have had to engage our municipal attorney again, just to understand the mechanisms of
Mhm.
authority, how this goes down, how the money should be. I think we're in a place where we haven't been before. So I think we would have needed to seek advice, and if someone approaches us, we would as well. I would use as an analogy the turf field and how we had to go through the funding scenarios for that. I'm sorry, Erica keeps getting cut off.
Yeah, no, Erica, please.
So I think in the interest of time, it is, there's all this noise surrounding this whole debate, right? There's like sort of all this chaos, and I think we need to step away from what was done at the different town meetings and really think about what we think is in the best interest of passing the budget that we think is best for our schools, for our district. And to me, there's a couple of things that I think we should be prioritizing. I mean, it can't just be exactly what we think the students need, because while that is how we need you to build the budget, it is also our obligation to figure out how to get the budget passed and how to, in my opinion, avoid being in a joint town meeting that leaves a budget potentially feeling forced down a town's throat. So I think we really need to think about collaboration. And I spent a lot of this weekend, like, just listening to the news and thinking, I don't want to become with people that aren't talking across the aisles anymore, right? So how do we do this? And what are the key things? And I think in terms of operational audit, I don't think DESI is going to satisfy what at least Essex has asked us to look into. So if we think that's a key part of the puzzle, to at least address some of the questions, and I don't think there's a lot of questions, at least I haven't heard a lot of specific questions, but so I just want to identify 3 targets that I think have been raised. And people may not agree on this because we've probably heard these from different sources, but clearly the class size has come up repeatedly. So we've heard that, we heard it at the all boards meeting, and we've heard it many times since. And an issue that I know Manchester leadership has raised has been the administrative expense and understanding how the non-programming side of our budget is allocated. And maybe this falls into the same category, but overhead. Are there certain overhead expenses, and is there any type of savings? So for me, those are 3 areas that are sort of targeted budget areas that, whether it's an operational audit or whether it's a subcommittee working collaboratively with subcommittees from the town boards, could we come up with a discrete list of items that we are committed to looking at to see? And I don't know. I actually, it's quite possible that we're doing everything we can. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't, but we need to analyze it. And we need to make sure that people feel like we've been transparent about it. So I'm sorry, that was long-winded. I didn't mean it to be, but I have thought about that.
So I'm going to take my comment and then Jake's. To that point, I agree that there are some questions that it would be helpful to answer for the community. I also have seen repeatedly, we have specifically asked what are the questions, and getting the answers is difficult. So if we knew what the questions were, that would be the case. So that's why in my headspace right now, I'm bringing this back to here. What do I need to know to decide on this budget? And what I need to know to get behind it is the administrative comps. I definitely need to know that because it's something that keeps coming up again, being brought to me. I went through this whole thing with the class size, so I'm good with it, but I understand other people don't. And for me, I need to know more about how can we use school choice most effectively and increase the fee structure and looking at the fee structure most effectively to bring in those revenues. That said, I agree that the DESI report probably won't satisfy Essex's asks on this. I also think it's just a good move to ask to be bumped up if that's possible. I think it's just a good move for a lot of reasons. But I don't think we have the time or bandwidth. And I know that with the transition coming up, there's going to be even less. I would rather engage with NESDEC, take that complementary enrollment study and see what the costs are for doing a deep dive on some of these things that we could then actually get from someone else doing it. Then it's not us doing it. I think if we do our own analysis, that's also not going to satisfy the same group of people that DESI analysis wouldn't satisfy. Actually, I know.
There, I wasn't suggesting we do it on our own. I was suggesting that we either do it collaboratively, working with a subcommittee of our, other stakeholders, or an independent party.
I'd be in favor of it. Jake?
So I'm actually going to share, I put together thing similar to this.
Jake, I'm gonna call, we have 7 minutes left
Yeah.
in this meeting, and you're handing out a packet that no one has seen before.
Okay.
We give them a chance to kind of summarize.
We can, but I am leaving this room at 9 PM. I sent out an email, made that very clear. We have health issues in my family right now, and I cannot be here 1 minute past 9 PM. And I feel like this is not respectful of our time.
I have to also say, this would have been appropriate to send out after the fact, or to say, I did this and can I send it out after the fact? Because we did email about this in advance and I said, can we get through tonight and then share this with you? So.
Or distribute materials before the meeting, as is our practice.
The request was made and I said, can we wait until after? Because this isn't the focus of conversation.
But it's become the focus of conversation, which is why I'm introducing it.
I
Just-
am not in agreement with the process that you're using right now. I'm putting it out there on the record.
Okay. I have now passed it out, so let me just explain it and then we can talk about it later.
We have 2 minutes.
I have done basically what Erica just did. I identified the questions that the town has asked of us and tried to frame it in a way that might be useful to us and the town. And the list here, those same topics are essentially choices that may, you know, a $40,000 scope might be able to address one or maybe two of these, right? So all this is doing is laying out the topics that I've heard from the town that might be good points for us to collaborate through a consultant to get information that will both build the trust with the town, respond to their requests, and potentially help us.
But I'm concerned about the title here, possible foci for a 40K Essex district review. That was part of the reason that we were discussing this offline. So we're not spending Essex's money right now. But if you're talking about the top.
This is for purpose of discussion with the town about the potential use of.
Yeah. Okay, so do we want to continue this conversation at the next meeting then, knowing that we need to move forward with this? With some form of this, it sounds like we have some form of agreement that we should do something. How do we want to move forward? But we are going to respect the stop at 9.
I have a question before we go, but
Are you asking if we're gonna move forward as in for next time, or we're gonna, or somewhere in between before the next school committee meeting?
No, I'm saying that between now and the next, we're not going to be able to make a decision tonight about what we're doing moving forward. But between now and the next meeting, we can come prepared to make a decision.
So what I have not heard is I have not heard anyone say that they are opposed to some sort of review,
Is anyone here
No one is
opposed to
opposed.
some sort of third-party review?
to a review. What I have heard is that some people are opposed to spending a lot of money on a review. Some people are opposed to spending, well, actually, I haven't even heard that people are opposed to spending administrative time and energy. All I've heard is that our budget doesn't have a ton of wiggle room right now. While I appreciate that Essex has voted to spend $40,000 on this, Essex has not presented any specific scope of work, or they have not presented anything that would spend that $40,000, because the original proposal that we received from them was based on a bid that was anywhere from $75,000 to $120,000.
In fairness to our town partners, I mean, the town meeting was a week ago yesterday, so they may not have had a chance to actually.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, and so,
That's what I think.
like, we
So
can't,
why
I
are
don't
we
feel like
discussing
we
this?
can look at
That's
this,
what I don't
I
understand.
don't feel like until we have heard.
This isn't just about what Essex is providing, I'm setting aside exactly how this was titled. This is also about what we think as a committee is essential to moving forward. And Teresa, you brought up the idea of, you know, moving forward, I can't remember the acronym, but the study.
Yeah.
I think set aside Essex funding, what do we think as a committee we need to do to get a budget that we can support past? And I think having some type of independent review is going to help us.
All right, so at the risk of doing this in a very, very short amount of time, I will make a motion. I'll make a motion that we engage with NESDEC, that we re-engage our, you know what I'm saying? Help me with the language here.
That we,
might want to have a conversation with them first and see what some of their report outs look like. I know what, sorry, but I know what services they offer. I don't know what the reports look like.
Okay, so can
I'm
we,
not endorsing
in
them.
our
I'll take
2
them.
minutes,
Okay.
make a list of the questions that we would like Pam to pass on to NASDAQ about what they
About
could
what
look.
this can,
And I think that we heard class size, we heard administrative costs, and overhead, what was the?
We just
overhead?
need some sample
school
reports.
choice and fees.
That's it.
School choice.
Yeah, but, so I guess why NASDAQ?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of potential consultants that could answer these kind of questions.
Yes. And
This
so
is
so it
one that
sounds
we
like
have
we need to
already-
continue this conversation at our next meeting.
Yeah, and I'm gonna sound
There are-
difficult, and that is not my intent, but I feel like that illustration where the person's at the fork in the road, where we just had a conversation about building a budget that's in the best needs of students and not being, not going crazy, but, you know, don't cap it at 2.5, build what you need. But at the same time, we're gonna go through this huge process to see how we can essentially restructure what we do. And maybe it's, you don't need to restructure and you have to invest, but I don't know the value of building up if we are going through a period of evaluation. Right. So are we better served by, and don't take it the wrong way, but are we better served by reducing a 2.5 and then going through this process and coming out the other end, where then you look at how to budget and how to go forward? We're going to take on 2 very big projects at once. We'll figure out how to make the time. I just don't even think we know what we're asking for yet. I mean, administrative comps we can get from other districts. That's not hard to do. Is it a benchmarking report? Is it a program? So I think all those questions that originally existed still exist.
Okay, I'm sorry, I really.
Yeah, no,
don't
we
know,
need,
and
we do need to, because we committed to this. And we can't each time just stop it. So let us say that we table this conversation, continue it next time. We have a lot to consider there, but you have the direction, at least for this budget. Do not have any consensus here, but it does sound like nobody's completely opposed to having things, but we don't have an answer at the moment.
So we're gonna put this on the agenda next time,
Yeah.
to TBD, yeah?
Be discussed, yeah.
Can we have the full tentative budget next time?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, well, it's what it is. School committee comment, just very briefly, the tentative meeting on the, 19th of December, it sounds like we're probably going to need that. So just, we need to keep in mind if we have a quorum. Yeah, we don't have to decide it right now, but as when we send out, Pam's gonna send out information, maybe you could include that, like, will we have a quorum to meet that day?
But we need to plan an executive session for that night too, so if we don't have a quorum, I just need to know so we can reset.
I'm gonna do a swap, like Christmas carols and all that.
Not in this.
I just have a quick comment. I would just like to, for anyone listening, I would like to thank the voters of Essex for like addressing the field issue. I think that's, to me, that's personally a huge part of the school finances, and I think that was just a very positive vote, so.
I agree. Thank you. Okay, motion to adjourn, second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
And this is not. Every time.
Am I allowed to end this meeting, Pam, or is anything needs to happen?
No, no, just end it.
Yes.
Before 10 o'clock.